Chapter 2238. With such diligence, a month passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, Li Dazhuang, who had been kicked out, went to the refugee camp to experience, and then came back to find Chu Yang with a drooping head. Ma Kongquan also often came to chat with him. He also heard how Zhu Yu was going to take revenge on him, but apart from these things, there was nothing else. Chu Yang's days were extremely monotonous. Of course, the results were very obvious. Apart from the fact that he had 15 doppelgangers, he already had a foundation. With this, his progress was extremely fast. When he wrote a good calligraphy, he couldn't help but wonder if his hand was himself. What did it do? After he painted a landscape painting, his level seemed to be on par with the ancient painters. He seriously suspected that he had missed something in his previous life. He seemed to be very talented in painting, but why did he feel that he couldn't do it in his previous life? When he played a melodious song with the guqin, he felt that not only should he be a painter in his previous life, he should also be a singer, a capable singer. Look at the song he played, how ancient and how pleasant it was. The so-called singing was equivalent to killing. That was definitely slander, a serious slander. That person had ruined his beautiful and brilliant life in his previous life. Because of this, Chu Yang howled incessantly. Later on, when he was proficient in everything and proficient in everything, whether it was historians or military strategists, he realized that he was nothing but a dog's fart. The reason why he could be like this was purely due to the change in his martial arts. It was enough to say one thing: spiritual power. With his saint-level spiritual power, he learned everything too quickly and too easily. Chu Yang himself returned to his original form, and his little pride disappeared. He also became more diligent and hard-working. Those things in the central province, which one of them had poor martial arts cultivation, which one of them had poor spiritual power. On the 31st day, he felt that there was a warm current in his body from time to time, but it was quickly suppressed by something inexplicable. At first, he didn't pay much attention to it, but on the 33rd day, that warm current finally couldn't be suppressed and quickly flowed around his body. In such a situation, he naturally had to take a look. When he saw that there were many pure and holy filaments within his body, like tree roots, continuously growing within his flesh, he could not help but feel a wave of bewilderment. What the hell is this? He really couldn't understand. Could it be a rule? But what rule is this? Chu Yang's physical body had become a deity. After going through such a stage, he was very familiar with the lines of law. The thin strands that appeared in front of him were roughly the same as the original lines of law. Wen Dao rule line? After carefully comprehending, pondering, and recalling what he had done recently, he immediately came up with a conjecture. The reason for such a change in his body was definitely because he had done something before. Tracing back like this, the answer was on the verge of being revealed. However, did the literary Tao also have its own rules? Could it also form lines of rules? Furthermore, with his current level of Wen Dao, would he be able to produce Wen Dao's lines of law? Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. But what exactly is this? While Chu Yang was puzzled, the Destiny Twins' martial spirits suddenly moved. The world formed by the 21 souls was like a star, following along his spine, forming a line. After that, the scene of a primitive society appeared in the first world. Following that, the slave societies of Xia, Shang, Western Zhou, Spring and Autumn, the establishment and initial development of feudal society, the warring states, Qin, Han, as well as the division of feudal society and the great integration of ethnic groups, the three kingdoms, the two Jin dynasties, the northern and southern dynasties all appeared one by one. Chapter 2239. At the same time, the holy threads in his flesh and blood grew and extended even faster. Soon, they covered his entire body. His entire body became bright and translucent. Rays of holy white light shone, making him look incomparably holy. The ancient history of my previous life. Chu Yang stared at everything in the world and compared them. He couldn't help but exclaim, Sui and Tang. 5 dynasties: Liao, Song, Xia, Jin, Yuan. Ming and Qing dynasties. After that, the prosperous Sui and Tang dynasties, the further strengthening of ethnic integration, the 5 dynasties, Liao, Song, Xia, Jin, Yuan, as well as the Ming and Qing dynasties, which unified many ethnic groups and gradually declined, also appeared one by one. What's going on? Why did the history of my previous life appear in the heavenly soul realm one by one? What does this have to do with the literary path of the central continent? Buzz, buzz, buzz. While Chu Yang was stunned by all of this, his lower abdomen also trembled violently. It was as if a star was moving, and as if a gate had been opened, the long river of history surged out. In an instant, on his 2-dimensional grotto heaven coordinates, along the horizontal line, the ancient history of his previous life appeared one by one. It was really like a long river of history, recording every historical stage and dynasty. Why did such a change suddenly happen? Could it be that the literary path of the central continent is hiding a great secret? Is all of this because of my hard work? Chu Yang couldn't find north at all. Countless question marks appeared and occupied his entire mind. He was completely dumbfounded. Originally, he killed Beigong Buang and the other 3 saints in the East Continent. The saint source energy he obtained was rapidly being consumed. The world formed by the 21 souls and the 2-dimensional grotto heaven coordinates each consumed 2 saint source energy. Along with the growth of countless threads, his entire body was completely wrapped by the threads. Soon, he turned into a cocoon of light. What shocked him the most was that not only did the ancient history of his previous life appear one by one, but poems, paintings, articles, books, and so on corresponding to each dynasty were also born one by one and appeared in front of him. Since all of this has happened, there must be a reason. I won't pursue this for now. Let's feel it carefully. Maybe I'll know the answer. Chu Yang calmed down and carefully sensed and comprehended. Soon, he entered a strange state of mind. He forgot about everything and entered a state of enlightenment. In such a state, everything happened even faster. His body became even more dazzling, and the holy light he emitted became even more intense. It was dazzling and glaring, and the light cocoon was like a sun that had fallen from the heavens to the mortal world. The entire little eastern town lit up, as if it had turned into a heavenly kingdom, a world of light. Rumble. In the sky, it was as if the thunder god had suddenly paid a visit to little eastern town. After the world shook, that inexplicable sound also resounded. It seemed to be the sound of reading, but it also seemed to be the sound of the great path. Many strange phenomena appeared one after another and quickly attracted the attention of the people of little eastern town. Then, they were all shaken and cried out in surprise. It was a complete uproar. What happened? Why is the sky suddenly so bright? There were also many people who were alarmed. That location seems to be where the refugee is. Chu Yang had been in Little Eastern Town for more than a month. Because of the previous incident, he had attracted a lot of attention. Therefore, at this time, someone said this. That's right. Didn't they all say that the refugee bought a house there? If that's the case, then all of these strange phenomena were caused by the refugee. Let's go and take a look. Won't we know? Why are we still guessing? That's right. The people of Little Eastern Town began to rush towards Chu Yang's location. Soon, they converged into a flood and completely submerged the small bridge and the flowing water. Lu Sun Huan, it really was Lu Sun Huan. Chapter 2240. Light, a dazzling yet gentle light, completely submerged that part of the world. The small bridge, the flowing water, and the people were all gone, disappearing into the endless light. The people from Little Eastern Town who had gathered here were also submerged in the light. They all retreated one after another and looked at the place from afar. No one knew what was happening, and no one knew what was in that endless light. The noisiest voice rang out again. Many people couldn't help but ask the questions in their hearts. What is Lu Xuanhuan doing? Is he cultivating? If he is cultivating, why can't I feel the fluctuation of spiritual energy or magical power? Could it be that he is studying? That's impossible. Strange, this is really strange. Xiao xiao xiao, xiao xiao xiao. Bursts of air-piercing sounds came from afar, one after another. These people were all martial artists. At this moment they were also completely alarmed. What is Lu Xuanhuan doing again? Li Dazhuang, who was working hard to get rid of Chu Yang as soon as possible and go to the brothel, sensed the strange phenomenon at the first moment, but he held it in. In the end, he couldn't hold it in and rushed back. Ma Kongquan also came. He was naturally very concerned about Chu Yang's matter. Of course, Zhu Yu also came. How could such a thing happen without her? Qian Zi and Viper had been hiding and waiting. At this moment they also came. Even though they were cautious and stayed far away from Chu Yang, everything they saw still shocked them. Wild dog, could it be that he has made another shocking breakthrough? Rumble. In the sky, a loud rumble sounded like thunder, but it wasn't thunder. Accompanied by such a loud sound, it was as if the curtain of an era was lifted. A world appeared in midair, and within it a scene appeared. It seemed to be an ape that slowly walked upright. Only then did everyone realize that it was a human. Does this mean that a human is transformed from an ape? Everyone had a different understanding of the scene in the sky. Someone opened his mouth and said his guess. Are you kidding? How can a human be transformed from an ape? Isn't this a joke? Then how do you think a human is formed? Such a question quickly spread. In midair, the scenes in the illusory world were constantly changing. Drilling wood to make fire, using fire to drive away beasts, preserving the fire seed, all sorts of scenes appeared. A scene of primitive human society unfolded in front of everyone. Unfortunately, no one could agree with such a primitive society, and no one could agree that humans were transformed from ape. Humans were born as humans, so how could they have evolved? This was definitely a fallacy. This was what almost everyone was thinking. Li Dazhuang was full of disdain. Lu Xiaobei, is his ancestor a beast? Just a beast? You actually came up with such a bullshit. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Haha, a lowlife is indeed a lowlife. He's not even a lowlife, he's a beast. Zhu Yu and Li Dazhuang had the same thoughts, but the difference was that Zhu Yu was full of sarcasm and malice. Ma Kongquan did not speak. Although he did not understand everything in front of him, he did not think that Chu Yang was doing something meaningless. Look, the Book of Songs has appeared. The arithmetical classic has also appeared. The Book of Ci, the Book of Painting, the Book of Qin, the Book of History, the Book of War, and so on have all appeared. All sorts of literature have appeared. Chapter 2241. Not only that, but more and more scenes appeared in the illusory world, and they became faster and faster. People were dazzled. Fireworks lingered in the air. Every time they saw a scene clearly, it would change into another one. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. The Shang Kingdom. The Yellow Emperor's internal canon. During this period there were all kinds of voices. What they shouted were all the scenes they saw in the illusory world. First in learning. Confucius and the 10 wise men of Confucius. Ziyuan, Ziqian, Boniu, Zhonggong, Ziyu, Zigong, Zilu, Ziwa, Ziyu, and Zixia also appeared one by one. Their voices kept coming from that world. Isn't it pleasant to learn and practice it? Isn't it pleasant to have friends from afar? Isn't it a gentleman to not be angry despite not knowing? He is also filial, and it is rare to offend his superiors. It is not good to offend his superiors, but it is good to cause trouble. A gentleman takes care of the root, and the root is the Tao. Filial piety is the root of benevolence? The Analects of Confucius. When Ma Kongquan saw this, he was shocked. Brother Lu, do you think that the Analects of Confucius was not written by Qin Sheng, but by Confucius? In Zhongzhou, although it was generally accepted that the Analects of Confucius was written by Qin Sheng, it was not completely confirmed because there was too little evidence. And the conclusion that the Analects of Confucius was written by Qin Sheng was only obtained from a few words. To the scholars of Zhongzhou, the author of the Analects of Confucius was still a mystery. Bastard, the Analects of Confucius was written by Qin Sheng. How dare you blaspheme Qin Sheng? You deserve to die. Zhu Yu was different from Ma Kongquan. He directly put a big hat on Chu Yang. His intentions were vicious. Once the scholars of Zhongzhou knew, they would definitely attack him. The people were also shocked and exploded into a shocking uproar. Those who know me are called the Spring and Autumn Annals. Those who do not know me are guilty of the Spring and Autumn Annals. Confucius traveled around the countries and wrote the Spring and Autumn Annals and many other books. Those pictures also appeared in front of everyone one by one, explaining everything clearly. Most importantly, the origin of Confucianism was thoroughly explained. Zhu Yu immediately went silent. That lowlife had a complete set of theories and was suddenly not afraid of debating. If he took a step further and attracted the attention of the scholars of Central State, they might not be able to frame that lowlife and might even increase his fame again. He had already done such a stupid thing once. He definitely didn't want to do it a second time, but it seemed that he had already done it. Ma Kongquan didn't notice Zhu Yu at all. His eyes were filled with shock. The origin of every civilization was too important, and it would be a great contribution to clear it all up. Therefore, he once again thought of the scene of the flourishing age of Wendao, and thought of what Yi Boran had said. Chu Yang was very likely to be the founder of the new era of Wendao. At this moment, connecting the scenes in front of him, everything seemed to be developing in that direction. After that, the 7 kingdoms, Qin, Han, Wei, and Jin dynasties all appeared. However, everything after that became very blurry. It was impossible to see the scene, but it was constantly evolving. This continued for a whole 3 days. During these 3 days, the people of Little Eastern Town lived in the light, completely losing the darkness. Of course, they also had to make a living, so they naturally couldn't pay attention to Chu Yang. Only Ma Kongquan didn't leave from the beginning to the end. Li Dazhu was also generally there. In the afternoon of the 36th day, when the light disappeared and the world returned to normal, the people of Little Eastern Town immediately knew that Chu Yang must have finished. Many people rushed over again. Chapter 2242. Brother Lu. Originally, Ma Kongquan had many questions in his heart and was eager to know the answers. But the moment he rushed in, he saw Chu Yang standing there in a daze, as if he couldn't understand what was going on at all. Thus, he instantly held back his question. Lu Wei, what are you doing? Don't you know what you've done is inhumane? Because of you, Little Eastern Town has already lost its night. Just this point alone is a great sin. Li Dazhuang didn't have any hesitation. He opened his mouth and went all out. And with this roar, Chu Yang was directly roared back, but he didn't make a sound immediately. His body had become a godhead, and because of the law of Wendao, his body seemed to be strengthened again, but he wasn't sure. Whether it was the heavenly spirit world's martial Dao system or the myriad god world's martial Dao system, there was a new system that could rival the two. Wendao seemed to be able to display the same power as the martial Dao. That wasn't all. Chu Yang's body had changed a lot, and Li Dazhuang couldn't figure it out. Lu Wei, you know you're wrong, kneel down. Li Dazhuang roared again. Speaking of kneeling down, he was full of scars and tears. It could be said that he was not lightly dealt with by Chu Yang. That villain Lu was more shameless, treacherous, unreasonable, and violent than him. Impudent, a little servant dares to shout at his master? Li Dezhuang, you're rebelling. Kneel down now or you'll be alerted. Chu Yang retaliated. In an instant, Li Dezhuang, who had a look of disdain on his face, who thought that as long as he had money in his pocket, he would not panic. Li Dezhuang, who was no longer a hero, suddenly felt a strange force acting on his body. He was caught off guard and fell to his knees with a plop. What was going on? Li Dezhuang became a fool in an instant. Chu Yang was also stunned. Looking at the big guy kneeling on the ground, he rubbed his chin and muttered, "Strange things happen every year, but this year seems to be especially strange. Li Dezhuang, don't you have one tael of silver under your knees?" "One tael of silver?" Li Dezhuang instantly cried out in grief. "Uncle Li, my gold is gone again. Lu Wei, give me back my gold." "Kneel." With a thud, Li Dezhuang felt as if he had heard an imperial edict. Under the influence of that inexplicable force, he knelt down again. This time, his eyes widened as he looked at Chu Yang in astonishment. Ma Kongquan was also completely shocked. This seemed to be the law of the sage, but Chu Yang had not reached the sage realm yet. Chu Yang was also puzzled and said to Li Dezhuang, "I said you're a mongrel. I'm a dog." "She said you're a turtle." "I am a tortoise." "She said you are a pig." "I'm a pig." Chu Yang's mouth twitched. Li Dezhuang, tortoises, turtles, dogs, pigs, chickens, ducks, cows, sheep, and all sorts of other animals were made. He even tried to imitate a puppy. After barking for a while, he knocked his head against the wall and stripped himself naked again. He had nothing left to live for. At this time, not only was Chu Yang certain, but Ma Kongquan and Li Dezhuang were also certain. The law of the sage realm. It was too shocking, too frightening. He could actually act like a sage without reaching the sage realm. "Go away, all of you. Let me find a corner and quietly show my IQ." Chu Yang's brain was about to turn into paste, and he opened his mouth. Ma Kongquan and Li Dezhuang had no choice but to do as they were told and leave immediately. When that kind of strange power broke out again, Chu Yang followed this kind of feeling because of the accumulation of many previous experiences. He looked for the vein and carefully comprehended. Suddenly, he probed into the rules of the Tao and suddenly realized, the power of the Tao, this is the suppression of the Tao. Li Dezhuang, that trash, can only obediently follow orders because of his great knowledge of words. "Gentleman Ma, stop right there." With a loud boom, he rushed out and said to Ma Kongquan, "Are you going to be a sissy for this prodigy?" Ma Kongquan was already in a state of shock, but when he heard those words, he felt an immense force acting on his body. He could not help but raise his lotus finger and let out a shrill voice like a woman. It was a little coquettish. Chu Yang had goosebumps all over. Chapter 2243. Hee, it seems that not only can I bully illiterates, I can also bully cultured people. Literary Tao was not simple. After Chu Yang was enlightened, he was overjoyed. Geniuses are not scary, what's scary is that geniuses are cultured, wahahaha. He laughed wildly. He finally understood the gist of it. There were many ways to make people kneel. It could be threats, coercion, enticement, or exchange of benefits, etc. The same was true for the way to make people kneel. Martial Tao was not the only way, there were other ways. If the reason why saints were able to make their martial Tao was because their martial Tao was recognized by heaven and earth, then Chu Yang's was because his literary Tao was recognized by heaven and earth. The reason why saints were able to do this was because their cultivation was higher than most people. The reason why Chu Yang was able to do this was also because of the same reason. His literary Tao was much higher than most people. The literary Tao of the central region was too weak. Chu Yang's literary Tao was already comparable to a martial Tao saint. In other words, the literary Tao could also possess heaven-shaking power. It could also be used to fight and kill. Who said that literati did not use violence? It was only because they had not reached the stage of fighting. Ha ha! Chu Yang was also laughing crazily. In his previous life, he had only studied for a few years. He was definitely not a literati. Poems and so on were forgotten. He was definitely at the level of trash. However, in the heavenly spirit world, he was not only a literati, he was also using literature to suppress others. If literary Tao could have the same power as martial Tao, everything would be easy to explain. His destiny twin martial spirits had brought him into the world of literary Tao, thus he obtained the secrets of literary Tao. Io, this great genius is laughing to death. Chu Yang laughed crazily for a while. Seeing Ma Kongquan and Li Dazhuang looking at each other, he immediately ordered them one by one. Idiot Li, why are you still not worshipping? This sage will teach you how to write big words. Gentleman Ma, why are you still not here to ask for advice? Show me your ignorance. Literary sage. Although Li Dazhuang and Ma Kongquan were unhappy, it seemed to be the truth. Ma Kongquan sighed with emotion. More than a month ago, Yi Boran had said that Chu Yang might very well be the person who opened up a new era of the Wen Dao. The Wen Dao was just like the martial path, possessing the ability to flip the heavens and overturn the earth. At that time, he couldn't believe it, but in the blink of an eye, it became reality. Brother Lu, why don't you try and see how powerful Wen Dao is? Ma Kongquan was looking forward to it, and so was Chu Yang. Chu Yang did not answer. He immediately spat out a word, mountain. Rumble. The void shook violently. Soon after, a towering mountain formed in midair. It was as if a giant beast had emerged from the void. It covered the sky and cast an enormous shadow. As it shook, rubble rolled down from the peak of the towering mountain. The rumbling sound was terrifying. Dong. As soon as the mountain landed, the earth shook violently. Endless smoke and dust soared into the sky. It was as if the mountains were shrouded in fog all year round. Immediately, the towering mountain was also shrouded in clouds and fog. It's really possible. It's really done. Ma Kongquan still felt like it was a dream. The water of the Yellow River comes from the sky and flows to the sea, never to return. Chu Yang tried again and chanted this sentence. Above the void, a huge river seemed to have come from the depths of space and time. It surged in midair and poured down in torrents. The wind blows and the water turns cold. The hero leaves and never returns. The autumn wind was blowing, the autumn was cold, and the surroundings were bleak. The north wind was whistling, and the yellow leaves were dancing in the cold wind. A big river was splashing and flowing. Chapter 2244. Jing Ku assassinated the Qin Emperor. Jing Ku was like that? Chu Yang couldn't help but frown slightly. Although the mountains that Wen Dao had conjured were majestic, they weren't real enough. There were no plants, birds, or beasts. The river that he had conjured, as well as the image of Jing Ku, were huge, but the power wasn't concentrated enough, and was rather scattered. Wen Dao's techniques were slightly inferior to martial arts. If he was in the Nirvana realm, his techniques in martial arts would have the power of the Nirvana realm, while Wen Dao would have the power of the peak of the Transcendence realm. However, Wen Dao's techniques were released at a faster speed. What Chu Yang couldn't understand was that Wen Dao was the same as martial arts. It also consumed spiritual power. Spiritual power should be unique to martial arts, but this wasn't the case. Let the ghosts research this. My head hurts a little. Chu Yang temporarily gave up on investigating the reason. Like a child trying out a new toy, he tried out many of Wen Dao's techniques and had a lot of fun. He also discovered more shocking aspects of Wen Dao. For example, it was easier to use space-time techniques when using the Shi family, which was above Wen Dao. He kept experimenting. Ma Kongquan and Li Dazhuang watched and listened silently. They were silent for a long time. They only reacted when Chu Yang stopped, but they didn't know what to say. Everything had exceeded their brain capacity. As for congratulating, Li Dazhuang didn't want to. Ma Kongquan's mind was a mess. He realized that the changes and effects of such a discovery were extremely far-reaching and would turn the world upside down. Therefore, he had stopped everyone from approaching. He had been thinking about those so-called important matters. He had been in a daze. When he left, he didn't even say goodbye to Chu Yang. "You are a scholar, why don't you go to the brothel?" With great difficulty, Li Dazhuang managed to squeeze out such a genteel sentence. But this was the only thing he could think of. Everything had nothing to do with him. So, he took advantage of Chu Yang's happy mood to say such a sentence. Perhaps he could still go to the brothel. "I am a prodigy, I only go to the 9 heavens." Bullshit. Li Dazhuang's saliva sprayed directly onto Chu Yang's face. "Don't think that I don't know. Recently I've been studying scholars. You scholars are the most self-righteous. Don't think that I don't know." Chu Yang looked at Li Dazhuang's face. This humble one had done his homework. He proudly said, "I am a romantic, so why should I call myself a romantic?" After he finished speaking, he clasped his hands behind his back and left. There weren't many people like Ma Kongquan in the little eastern town, or rather, Ma Kongquan was the only one. After all, who would have thought that the literary path could go hand in hand with the martial path? Therefore, the matter quickly faded away. However, the people of Little Eastern Town respected Chu Yang even more. Another 3 days passed, and after these 3 days of comprehension, Chu Yang realized that the literary Tao and the martial Tao did not conflict, and both could be used at the same time. The simplest example would be when he punched out with both his fist, and the power of the punch was twice as strong as before. According to this calculation, Chu Yang's combat power had doubled, and this greatly shocked the Ice Kuan. On the 4th day, Yi Boran, the governor of Zhuangyuan County, sent a letter, asking Chu Yang to go to the capital of Zhuangyuan County. Chu Yang felt that passing the examination of the literary palace and obtaining the scholar position was already a cinch. Moreover, he had stayed in Little Eastern Town for a long time, so he gladly went. Li Dazhuang did not leave with Chu Yang. He felt that he was not ready. If he rashly followed, he would only be humiliated. Therefore, Chu Yang naturally did not insist. He could play around, but he could not get involved in some important personal decisions. Chapter 2245. In the dark, Qianzi and Viper, who had been watching Chu Yang, finally let out a long sigh of relief when they saw him leave. The two of them were afraid that Chu Yang would notice them, so they didn't dare to get too close. Therefore, they didn't know about Chu Yang's literary skills. However, they knew that Chu Yang had made great progress in the past month. Every time Chu Yang improved, they would be in more danger. Naturally, they didn't want to see this. Therefore, they saw Chu Yang's rapid progress every day, but didn't know the details. Naturally, the pressure in their hearts increased little by little. That dog has finally left. Viper looked in the direction Chu Yang left. As if relieved of a heavy burden, he let out a long sigh. Then, he said, "It's time for us to make a move." They had waited for too long. If they waited any longer, they would probably lose their patience first. "Is it still up to us?" Qianzi said bluntly, "I'm very uneasy. I've always felt that we might fail this time." Viper actually had the same feeling, but he wasn't as honest as Qianzi. He also didn't want to boost the momentum of Wild Dog and destroy his own prestige. He also had a reason to be proud. There shouldn't be too many people who were as patient as them. There were even fewer people who were as well prepared as them. Perhaps only they would do such a stupid thing to ambush someone who hadn't reached the Nirvana realm with 20 saints. However, he compromised in the end. He said in a deep voice, "Should we spread the news that Lu Xuanhuan is Chu Yang? This way, those geniuses in Zhongzhou who admire Shangguanlan will definitely not let him go." Qianzi suddenly fell silent. Viper didn't interrupt his thoughts, although this wasn't a problem that needed careful consideration. In the silence, Viper could hear his own heartbeat and could also clearly hear Qian Zi's breathing. He didn't get impatient. He still waited quietly. Many facts had proven that Qian Zi was much better than him. Every time Qian Zi made a decision, it was very far-sighted and wise. If it wasn't for that dog, he believed that Qian Zi would be the most amazing person in the world. No! When the sound of a dog barking came from Little Eastern Town, accompanied by the angry roars of a few people, it seemed that a thief had broken into someone's house and was discovered. Qian Zi finally understood the reason for his hesitation. He had a faint feeling that he might become like that thief and be discovered by Chu Yang. At that time, he could only fight to the death. If he was lucky or hoped that someone else could kill Chu Yang, then he would not go all out. At the final moment, he might even think of escaping first and then plotting later. In his opinion, if he didn't go all out against such a dog, he would be courting death. If he wasn't prepared to die, then he would be the one to die in the end. Therefore, he couldn't leave himself a way out. Gather everyone and act according to Plan B. Ambush him at Zhuangyuan Mountain. Qian Zi finally gave the order. In order to successfully kill Chu Yang, he had prepared no less than 10 plans. None of the plans were superfluous. They were all prepared for a certain possibility. The second plan was prepared for Chu Yang's trip to Zhuangyuan County. "I'll go now." As soon as Viper finished speaking, his body disappeared completely. No one knew which direction he had gone in. He was like a ghost. Qian Zi put his hands behind his back and didn't move for a long time. He was adjusting his state of mind. The premonition of failure was too terrible. He needed to regain his confidence. This was also something that he had never experienced in his life. As a level 7 saint, he was actually afraid of a Dharma law practitioner to such an extent. At this time, scenes of Chu Yang appeared in his mind. He didn't speak for a long time, and his mood became heavier. "Wild dog, this time, it's either you die or I die. I want to see who will die this time." In the end, the sun and the moon appeared in Qian Zi's eyes. He was like a general who had gathered his troops, donned his armor, and carried his coffin to the battlefield. Since ancient times, how many people had returned from battle? Chapter 2246. Zhuangyuan Mountain was naturally a mountain, a very large and tall mountain. After crossing this mountain, one would arrive at the county capital of Zhuangyuan Commandery. Qian Zi had chosen to ambush Chu Yang here. In the morning, the warm spring sun shone down. Looking from afar, Zhuangyuan Mountain was still shrouded in fog. As one approached, the fog became thinner and thinner. Soon after, a mountain path could be seen winding around the mountain like a huge snake. The entrance to the mountain could be said to be the head of the snake. It was like a huge snake opening its huge mouth. Ignorant people were entering the snake's mouth one by one. On this side of the mountain, there were many people who wanted to enter the city. This mountain path was sometimes very busy, with people lining up like a long dragon. Sometimes it was very quiet, with only a few scattered figures. Sometimes it was even more desolate, with not a single person in sight. On both sides of the mountain road, the vegetation was lush. It was extremely quiet, without a trace of sound. When the sun shone on an ancient tree that was broken in the middle, it seemed to be tiptoeing. It was very quiet, not making the slightest sound. There were 4 people there, but there was nothing there. Even if one knew that there were 4 people there, they still couldn't see them. Instead, they seemed to only see 4 poisonous creatures: a spider, a centipede, a toad, and a scorpion. The spider seemed to be weaving a spider web on the broken tree and quietly waiting for its prey to walk into it. The toad hid in a dark corner as if waiting for mosquitoes to come. The centipede and the scorpion seemed to be crawling slowly in the wet soil. These were the 4 members of the Dark Thorn: the spider, the centipede, the scorpion, and the toad. They were naturally not poisonous creatures, but they were more poisonous than any poisonous creatures. Their hiding methods were also much better than poisonous creatures. Even if it was an earthly sovereign realm martial artist, the four of them were absolutely confident that they could not detect them. The four of them were waiting for the arrival of their prey, waiting for them to deliver a fatal blow. For this, they had been preparing for a long time. They had even practiced many assassination methods, so many that they couldn't even count them. It could be said that they had never been so meticulously prepared. Their opponent this time was only a warrior in the Transcendence realm. They were all saints, and the weakest among them was a 5th-level saint. Killing a Transcendence realm ant was as easy as lifting a hand, but now they had to be so careful and cautious, afraid of making the slightest mistake. Naturally, it wasn't just the four of them. In front of the four of them, there were things that they were very familiar with: Stone Gallbladder, Cinnabar, Realgar, and Nightmare Stone. These were naturally the titles of these four people, and they were also members of the Dark Thorn. In addition to Qianzi and Viper, they had secretly assassinated 10 saints. Later, all of them would gather here. Not only that, but the 10 saints sent by Sabermang would also appear. 20 saints were so cautious and went all out. It was more than enough to assassinate an earthly sovereign realm cultivator. However, regardless of whether it was the spiders, scorpions, toads, centipedes, stone gallbladders, cinnabar, realgar, or nightmare stones, none of them had any objections. Naturally, Qianzi had his own reasons for doing so. They believed in Qianzi 100%, because no matter how ridiculous Qianzi's decision was, it would definitely be proven to be correct in the end. This time, it would definitely be the same. Therefore, the 8 of them were very curious. How amazing was that wild dog called Chu Yang? According to Qianzi, that dog was not only not a dog, but also not a person. It was an unprecedented existence, an existence that they didn't know about. There was a brief moment of silence on the mountain path. As the caravan entered the mountain, it suddenly became somewhat noisy. The sounds of people, horses, and carriages interweaved into a busy melody. Behind the caravan, there were sporadic people hurrying along the street, following the mountain path towards the county capital. Chapter 2247. The sages sent by the Saber Mandala also began to appear. The 2 simple mountain folks who were carrying wine and mountain goods to the county capital were sweating profusely. They stopped and chatted along the way. They were still some distance away from Spider and the rest. The 2 of them were no different from the mountain folks. Even if Spider and the rest knew their identities, they would not be able to see through them. On the other side of the mountain road, a carriage coming from the direction of the prefectural city had a broken wheel when it was about to leave Zhuangyuan Mountain. A horse-faced coachman with a whip in his hand was cursing and complaining incessantly. A sickly-looking woman came down from the carriage. She was holding the hand of a 7- or 8-year-old child. She coughed and looked in the direction of the county capital, as if waiting for her husband to come. Needless to say, the coachman was definitely not a coachman. The woman was definitely not sick. The angry child was definitely not a child. He was a murderous killer whose hands were stained with blood. Qianzi, Spider and the rest heard that the scholar of Scholar County died at the hands of this young child. Therefore, if anyone thought that he was a child, they would be gravely mistaken and would die a horrible death. 15 of the 20 sages were here. There were still 5 sages who were not. They would appear at the most appropriate time. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the target that Qianzi, Spider and the rest had been waiting for finally appeared. They were still far away, but whether it was Spider, Centipede, the 2 mountain folks, the coachman, or the woman, they could not help but look in that direction. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. It disappeared in a flash. They quickly returned to normal. However, Qianzi's heart was already thumping and his palms were sweaty. A slender figure, dressed in a blue robe and looking like a scholar, came slowly on a donkey. The folding fan in his hand was gently waving. Words appeared on both sides of the fan. In front, I am a genius. In the back, a pear blossom pressed against a begonia. As the folding fan was waving, the words on it were constantly changing. Soon, the words, I am a genius became, heavenly martial prowess, and a pear blossom pressed against a begonia became, a myriad of doting on a begonia. At first glance, this person did not look like a proper person. Spider and the others really wanted to know how the folding fan was made. In any case, they did not understand, so for the first time, they felt that this person was not ordinary. That little donkey was actually very interesting. Why did the person bring a donkey here? Based on the strength of the person who had come, there was no need for such a small donkey. After all, it was only a short distance. As they gradually approached the county city, there was a large domain that forbade martial artists from flying. Anyone who violated this rule would be killed without mercy. The restrictions on martial artists in the central state were very strong. Even the number 1 county at the edge of the central state was like this, so one could imagine what it would be like if one went further. I have a little donkey, but I never ride it. The singing came from afar very quickly. The person seemed to be in a very good mood, and it was not a normal kind of happiness. What was even more amazing was that the words on the 2 sides of the folding fan changed again. Dragon meat in the sky in the front, donkey meat in the back. He seemed to be craving for donkey meat. This donkey's life was in danger. This person was naturally Chu Yang. The change in the words on the folding fan was a way for him to show off. He wanted to show off his extraordinary literary skills. Regardless of whether others understood or not, he had to do it. As for the little donkey, he had encountered a group of bandits along the way. The bandits had robbed the villagers, and Chu Yang had robbed the bandit. Thus, not only did he obtain a little donkey, but he also obtained half of the bandits' silver and many other things from the villagers. Chapter 2248. Bo Bo Bo. The fortune-teller knocked on the bamboo board with his left hand and waved the white cloth with his right hand. He was already shouting for business. Heavenly robe divination, flawless. Flawless heavenly robe, Operation Heavenly Robe. Operation Heavenly Robe had already begun. The fortune-teller's white cloth was the signal that Qian Zi and the rest had predetermined. It meant that Chu Yang had arrived as they had expected. Since Chu Yang had arrived, the operation naturally had to begin. Qian Zi abruptly clenched his fists, and a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. This dog must die this time. At this moment, 2 people rode their horses over from the other side of the mountain road. The person on the first horse had almond-shaped eyes and long eyebrows. He wore a sky-blue robe with a dark blue ribbon tied around it. He sat upright on the saddle. His back was straight and his eyes were bright. He was very well-groomed. Such people were always very memorable. On his left, there was another person on the horse. The person on the horse had a pale face and a slight beard. He had a calm demeanor and was very elegant. At first glance, one could tell that these 2 people were very powerful and had a very high status. And they were indeed like this. Fish and meat. They were the meat on the chopping block. Although these 2 people were not the chopping block, they were the 2 most trusted servants of the chopping block, fish and meat. Husband. Father. The sickly-looking wife and the pink and tender child's cheerful voice also came from there. It was as if the wife and child had come out to play and were stuck on the road. The husband and his friends had come to help. No one could tell that there was anything wrong with them. Indeed, Chu Yang did not see anything wrong with them. Whether it was the wife, the child, the 2 people on both sides of the mountain road, the 2 people behind them who were picking goods to sell, the villager who came to the market, the fortune-teller, and so on, he did not see anything wrong with them. He leisurely rode on the donkey and waved his folding fan. When he began to enter the mountain, the 2 villagers who were picking goods to sell immediately stopped chatting. They carried their burdens and followed behind Chu Yang at a distance. The same went for the fortune-teller and the 2 villager who came to the market. On the opposite side, the wife and child's group had also solved the problem of the wheels. The group of 5 also headed towards Chuyang. 10 feet, 90 feet, 80 feet. As he got closer and closer, he could hear the laughter of the 2 extraordinary people in front, the voices of a woman and a child, and the smile on the coachman's face. Behind him, the creaking of the pole, the chatter of the 2 mountain people, and the voice of the fortune-teller pestering the 2 people. All these sounds converged in Chu Yang's ears, interweaving images of the secular world, images of life. This seemed to be the real world, so Chu Yang felt even happier. When it was 15 meters away, the tender child suddenly turned to Chu Yang and said, "Uncle, I'll give you a fruit. Feed that little donkey." Without waiting for Chu Yang to speak, he raised his small hand and was about to throw it at Chu Yang. At this moment, Chu Yang noticed that the 2 people with extraordinary temperaments, the woman and the coachman, also raised their hands, as if they were about to throw a fruit over. Behind him, there was a clanging sound, as if a wine jar had cracked open. The 5 people behind him also seemed to be very concerned about his donkey and were about to throw a fruit over. At the same time, 5 people rushed out from both sides of the mountain road, all of them preparing to throw a fruit over. Has this commander been ambushed? At first, Chu Yang was in the mood to joke around, but when he saw Qianzi, his smile froze on his face. Many fruits were thrown over, and in an instant, the world began to hum and tremble. Then, spatial fissures began to appear, spreading throughout the void. Those fruits had completely revealed their true appearances as well. They were like stars, suns, extremely bright, or extremely dark as they smashed over with rumbling sounds. With a cracking sound, the space where Chu Yang was instantly shattered like a mirror. A spatial storm was about to sweep out, and at this moment the 20 fruits arrived. Not good. Chapter 2249. Naturally, it wasn't 20 fruit. Instead, it was an all-out attack, a fatal attack. It was like 20 stars and 20 suns, covering the sky and covering the sun. None of them were faster or slower. They all came at the same time, as if they were one. This was Qianzi's plan. 20 saints attacked at the same time. The 20 saints' attacks all fell on Chu Yang at the same time, maximizing their power. They wanted to kill Chu Yang with absolute power, not giving Chu Yang any chance to escape. Qianzi naturally knew that Chu Yang had spatial techniques, but he didn't seal this space. He also knew that Chu Yang had other ways to escape, but he didn't make any other arrangements. He just killed him directly. Simple. Direct. Killing people, just kill them directly. There was nothing else. Often, the simplest method was the most effective. Complicated methods weren't necessarily better. At least, that was what Qianzi thought. Amidst the loud rumbling, the extremely stable space-time of the Central Plains, which was difficult for those below the saint level to break, was torn apart like a piece of paper, revealing a black spatial storm. With a loud bang, it was as if 20 suns had collided. Within the black spatial storm, there was a violent explosion. Then, the 20 suns seemed to have merged together, suddenly expanding, forming an even bigger sun. In the end, they completely exploded. Immediately, endless violent energy swept out. Qianzi and the 20 saints were already prepared. After making their move, they quickly retreated. However, it was still too late. They were swept away and suffered from the impact, coughing up blood. The heavens and earth trembled and swayed. The Zhuangyuan mountain in front of the county city was struck by the huge energy storm. Like a huge piece of tofu, it directly exploded. Shattered rocks and dust filled the sky, drowning that part of the world. Endless light and endless wind were like rolling waves, sweeping in all directions, wreaking havoc in the heaven and earth, destroying everything in its path. The light covered the area, and the county city appeared. It was like a city on the horizon. Rumble. After the final explosion, the black hole in the center swallowed everything. The light disappeared, the wind disappeared, and so did the endless energy waves. The heaven and earth quickly returned to silence. The spatial crack also quickly closed and disappeared. The stability of the central plane's spacetime was once again displayed. Shoo! Shoo! Sounds of breaking through the air rang out. Qianzi, viper, fish, meat, spider, scorpion, the fortune-teller, and the others all broke through the air and arrived at the first moment. Their gazes all fell on one place. The place where Chu Yang was originally at was now empty. There was only a huge deep pit, and the entire sitting champion had already disappeared. Is he dead? Qianzi frowned and was the first to ask. He should be dead. I saw a finger shoot out of his body. It was that tender child, but right now, he spoke like an old man, not a child at all. I have a drop of his blood on my face. You, the woman's so-called husband, had a trace of blood on his fair face. The blood stain was very blurry, and the tremendous energy wave seemed to have swept that drop of blood away. Logically speaking, with 20 of us attacking, that dog should be dead. Meat, the person whose code name was Meat, pointed at his chest, where there was a bit of blood on his clothes. I saw a leg, but it was very short. My lower abdomen was pierced by half a bone. A strand of hair, like a divine whip, shattered the void. Chapter 2250. If that's the case, the dog should be dead. But why do I feel like it's not? Qianzi's furrowed eyebrows did not relax at all, and his expression became more and more serious. The rest of the people did not refute him. They had seen this and that, but they all had the same feeling in their hearts. The blood, fingers, and broken bones they saw did not seem to belong to the dog. How could the dog's blood, fingers, and broken bones have the aura of a saint or even an earthly sovereign realm expert? Although it was only for a moment, whether it was the pink child, the so-called fish, or the meat, they all sensed it clearly. With such a discrepancy, it meant that the dog might not be dead, and there should be a saint or an earthly sovereign realm expert beside him who died on his behalf. Their hearts suddenly sank. For the first time, they deeply felt the amazement of the dog. Qianzi had said in advance that the dog had a very big trump card that even he could not figure out. The only thing they were sure of was that the dog's trump card was extremely amazing. They had to be very careful. The fact was that an earthly sovereign realm expert, or an earthly sovereign realm expert, had a trump card that was very amazing. Search everywhere. Qianzi quickly gave the order. Even if he's not dead, he must be seriously injured. However, you still have to be careful. Even if he's seriously injured, you can't underestimate him. In addition, if the county chief of Scholar County doesn't know what's good for him and comes to stop us or do other things, just kill him directly. Don't care if he's an imperial court official or not. Rumble. As soon as Qianzi's voice fell, rolling thunder came from the east. Thunder cloud formed in the sky in the blink of an eye, covering the entire sky. In an instant, the sky became completely dark. Thunder calamity. Qianzi was too familiar with Chu Yang's methods. He was instantly shocked and shouted, "The dog is not dead. He's right there." The rest of the 19 saints and Chu Yang were also very knowledgeable. Even without Qianzi's voice, they instantly understood when they saw the thunder calamity cloud. This dog is really scary. With 20 of us attacking together, even an earthly sovereign realm expert would be killed. But he's still alive. The tender child's face could not help but reveal a look of astonishment. Don't talk so much nonsense. Hurry up and kill him. Otherwise, there will be no end of trouble. Qianzi was the first to make a move. He flew over, and the sound of him breaking through the air rang out. Chu Yang's lightning tribulation was extremely terrifying, but would it be useful against a saint? It was impossible for saints to get involved in the lightning tribulations of ants. They only had to be wary of the lightning tribulations of saints. Only lightning tribulations of that level would get them involved. Their levels were too far apart, so they could completely avoid Chu Yang's lightning tribulation. At the location of the lightning tribulation, Chu Yang was trembling violently. His mind was completely blank. His hands were covered in blood, his face was covered in blood, and his entire body was covered in blood. It was as if he had miraculously survived a tragic car accident. However, he still seemed to be in a state of extreme shock. His hands were covered in blood, his face was covered in blood, and his entire body was covered in blood. Of course, it wasn't his blood. It was the blood of the Ice Kuan. Of course, it was not a miracle that he had survived. There were not so many miracles in the world. It was the Ice Kuan that had saved him. The Ice Kuan had died for him. Of course, he was not in a state of extreme shock. Instead, it was because his closest kin in his life, his most important kin, had suddenly disappeared. They had been forcefully snatched away. Moreover, there were no signs before this. It was as if someone had ambushed him from behind while he was walking in the dark and ruthlessly stabbed him with a knife. While he was caught off guard, there was a piercing pain in his heart. Intense emotions collided together, so much so that he did not know how to deal with it. It was as if he had become numb. He seemed to have lost his emotions, and his thoughts had also stopped. Chapter 22:51. Master, I won't necessarily die. He couldn't tell if those words were true or not. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe Bing Kuan really said those words, but he couldn't be sure. After calming down, Chu Yang kept replaying Bing Kuan's face and smile in his mind. The memory was so clear and so deep. Bing Kuan faced enemies with him, went through life and death with him, answered his questions, helped him solve his problems, and accompanied him in his happiness, troubles, and sorrows. Bing Kuan was his support. Without Bing Kuan, he couldn't have been so calm and easily suppressed the East Continent. He couldn't have achieved his goals and become the best of his generation. There were too many things, and Chu Yang couldn't count them all. Bing Kuan had accompanied him on a very important journey in his life. Bing Kuan had accompanied him to the world of gods, to the 6 academies, to the 18 saints of the Central Continent, to the East Continent, and to the Central Continent. Bing Kuan had watched him grow up, the joys and sorrows of his life, and was like a brother and a father. No one could replace that kind of affection. But such an elder brother, such a father, had died just like that, died right in front of him. He died without a complete corpse. Chu Yang looked at his hand full of blood, and his mind seemed to turn red. Blood vessels crawled out of his eyes, and his face was as ferocious as a ghost. Ah! He was full of hatred, and he roared to the sky. Qianzi, I will chop you into pieces. You deserve to die, all of you deserve to die. I will send you to the 18th level of hell, and never let you reincarnate. Whoosh! Whoosh! Qianzi, Pink Child, Fish, and the others had all arrived. When they saw Chu Yang, their eyes were filled with shock. This dog didn't die. You are very sad and angry that your loved one died, right? Qianzi didn't attack directly. He smiled like a flower and said, I am very happy. Can you understand my feelings? Ha! Ha! Chu Yang laughed loudly. You dog, you want to completely enrage me and make me lose my mind, right? Congratulations, you did it. If I don't skin you alive today, I am not a human. Ha ha! Qianzi laughed even more heartily. Do you still have the ability to do that? You're only relying on that Earth Emperor Realm expert. Without this layer of support, what are you? If he really had that much confidence, he wouldn't have been so long-winded at this time, trying to provoke Chu Yang. It was because he did not have confidence that he was like this. After all, an enraged person was easier to deal with. Rumble! In the sky, the rolling thunder became even more intense, and the tribulation clouds became even thicker, as if they were about to fall. Lightning tribulation? Qianzi looked up at the tribulation cloud above his head and couldn't help but laugh. Wild dog, do you think I don't know what you're capable of? Do you think your lightning tribulation is still useful? Open your dog eyes and take a look. Is there anyone here below the saint level? Kiki. Chu Yang was provoked and he began to laugh strangely. His eyes were almost scarlet, and his gaze seemed to have turned scarlet. He stared coldly at Qianzi and said, "You dog, you will know in a moment. Now kneel down." With a roar, he directly used the power of Wendao. Immediately after, a strange energy was released from the void. Qianzi and the others immediately felt an extremely unfamiliar energy acting on their bodies. Their legs suddenly bent, and they couldn't help but kneel down. However, their bodies shook violently, and they abruptly stood up straight. The power of Wendao? It can do this. Chapter 2252. The Power of the Wendao. The spider, scorpion, centipede, stone gallbladder, cinnabar, realgar, fish, meat, and the little boy were all shocked when they heard this. How could the Wendao have the same power as the martial Dao? This really overturned their understanding of the Wendao. The Wendao and the martial Dao were two different paths. The Wendao was the Wendao and the martial Dao was the martial Dao. How could the Wendao have the same power as the martial Dao? If that was the case, wouldn't the Wendao be a type of martial Dao? But if that was the case, what was the difference between the Wendao and the martial Dao? In their impression, the Wendao was poetry, calligraphy, painting, dancing, and so on. Although the Wendao was strong, if they didn't cultivate the martial Dao, they were all weak chickens. This was the Wendao. But everything that happened in front of them proved that the Wendao was comparable to the martial Dao. After Qianzi spoke, they completely understood what they felt and experienced. That was indeed the power of the Wendao. In the Wendao, they were extremely weak, so when the wild dog asked them to kneel, they had no choice but to obey. But because of their strong mental power, they held on. At the core of the Wendao, mental power was one of the most important aspects. They were saints, so their mental power was naturally not low. On the other hand, Chu Yang's comprehension of the Wendao was not high enough. If it was high enough, no matter how strong their mental power was, they wouldn't be able to hold on and would be completely crushed. Because the opponent attacked their weakest point. This wild dog is really too amazing. If this continues, he will be able to create a whole new system. No wonder he wants to kill this wild dog. Qianzi is so careful, and even 20 saints to kill this wild dog, and he still thinks it's not enough. The spider, centipede, scorpion, fish, meat, and the little boy were shocked, but they finally understood Qianzi's feelings. This kind of enemy was too terrifying, and definitely couldn't be left alive. Qianzi's decision was too correct, or even extremely wise. If this wild dog could create the Wendao system, then the heavenly spirit world would have both the Wendao and the martial Dao. Their strength would definitely increase greatly, and when that time came, the gods' world would definitely not be a match. Therefore, this dog must die. Their killing intent suddenly became incomparably intense. They had never felt so urgent before. Wild dog, you're about to open up a new system, create a new era or even a new era. But you're going to die right at the beginning. Don't you think it's a pity? Qianzi suddenly laughed and boasted, "In your words, I am indeed a genius." After a pause, he continued in a mocking tone, "Also, I feel sorry for you. It's really a pity, ha ha." Spider and the others understood Qianzi's meaning and cooperated with him, laughing loudly. "Regret?" Chu Yang sneered. "Who has regrets? You were able to detect my Wendao cultivation in an instant. You're probably a genius, right? But you're going to die so early. It should be your regret, right?" Rumble. At this moment, thunder and lightning wreaked havoc in the sky. Rolling thunder rumbled as it descended. The dazzling lightning glow caused the dark and gloomy world to brighten up. "Wild dog, I told you that the lightning tribulation is useless. Qianzi's smile disappeared. He also realized that his words had provoked the wild dog. Although he was extremely angry, he still hadn't lost his mind. He admired this dog. If it was him, he would have lost his mind if someone close to him suddenly died, and then he was provoked and mocked by his enemies. Then, is this useful? Just as Chu Yang's voice fell, a blood-curdling scream exploded right behind Qianzi and the others. When they looked over, they saw that the coachmen, the two mountain people who were going to the market, the two people who were going to sell their goods, and the sickly woman were all smashed into pieces. The saint's source was also taken away. Chapter 2253. 6 Chu Yang, 6 Doppelgangers. A top-notch sacred weapon. Using these and his spatial techniques, Wild Dog lured them in with his true body, drawing their attention and then killing them. Just like how Chu Yang was caught off guard when he was ambushed, their 6 teammates were also caught off guard and died tragically. 6 doppelgangers, unbelievable! What a terrifying person! Not only can he create a literary system, but his martial arts are also far superior to others. There's no limit to it at all. What a good temperament, what a good scheme! Under such circumstances, he can still be so clear-headed and retaliate with the most ruthless method. The hearts of all the Qianzi's people were filled with shock. For such a character, the more you understood him, the more terrified you would be. Buzz buzz buzz. Chu Yang's 6 doppelgangers returned. The 5 Hell's mother-child heavenly demon cauldron vibrated in mid-air and buzzed. The origins of the 6 sages that it had devoured were all poured into Chu Yang's body and into his grotto heaven. In an instant, another world appeared behind him. Everything on the literary path was revealed once again. The dynasties that weren't shown clearly in the original world were shown clearly at this moment. The Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties were all real and clear. Countless poems and essays burst forth. It was the same for Chu Yang's two-dimensional grotto heaven coordinate. The origins of the 4 sages weren't enough to deduce everything. Now that the origins of the 6 sages were used as energy, it formed a huge power source. With a boom, everything was deduced. If I don't smash all of you to smithereens, I won't be able to vent my anger. It's a pity that the ones below can't do it. Chu Yang's eyes were completely red. Every word was said through gritted teeth. Don't be in a daze anymore. Kill this dog. Qianzi was already panicking. The others immediately came to their senses and were about to attack with murderous intent. Haha, it's too late. As Chu Yang laughed, flames appeared on his body. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, black, and other colors appeared. The colorful colors sometimes turned into chaotic colors, sometimes into monochromatic colors, changing at will. At the same time, the flames behind him turned into a sun of discussion, surrounding Chu Yang in the center. Rumble! In the sky, the sound of thunder suddenly changed. Rolling thunder rumbled continuously, as if firecrackers had been lit. The heaven and earth shook, the void shook, the earth shook, and the mountains shook. Amidst the endless sounds of thunder, clusters of flames suddenly appeared in the sky. They were densely packed and filled the entire sky. It was like a majestic rain pouring down. Be careful, this tribulation fire seems to be a little strange. Qianzi suddenly stopped attacking and reminded in a loud voice, Wild Dog is not ordinary. Although it's only the tribulation fire of a Nirvana realm cultivator, you must not be involved. Viper also said in a loud voice, thunder tribulations triggered by a Nirvana realm cultivator usually descend with thunder. However, Wild Dog is descending with tribulation fire. This is unusual in itself. When this was said, the remaining 14 people were all shocked. Qianzi was the same. He hadn't thought of this point. Even though Viper said it himself, he was still shocked after saying it. This was indeed extremely strange. Although they were sages, and as long as they didn't attack ants, they wouldn't be involved in the tribulation lightning. Was that really the case? Chapter 22:54. Heavenly fire rained down from the sky like rain. It was as if a peerless painting had been opened. The scene in the painting was so shocking that it made people absent-minded. The people in Scholars County had different reactions when they saw the heavenly fire, but they were all absent-minded in the end. Ye Bourne, the county governor of Scholars County, sensed the commotion at Scholars Mountain and rushed over with his men. When he saw the scene, he immediately ordered that no one was allowed to approach. At the same time, he was already frightened. Even without the heavenly fire, he did not dare to go out and provoke those people. The only thing he could do was to ask for backup. Otherwise, he would only be courting death if he went out rashly. Ah! In the distance there was a shocking scream. The heavenly fire rained down, and the place seemed to have turned into an 800-mile-wide mountain of flames. At the center, the flames burned the sky, burning and destroying everything. What kind of tribulation fire is this? Why is it so terrifying? Even a saint can't dodge it. When the fortune-teller's tribulation fire approached him, even though he was a saint, he couldn't avoid it. The wooden board and white cloth in his hands were instantly burned to ashes. His hands were also burned. His shoulders and the top of his head were also burned. The smell of burnt flesh instantly spread out. This is Emperor Fire. The wild dog is extraordinary and is valued by heaven and earth. Its tribulation cannot be touched, it cannot be observed. No. The tender child had just cried out in fear when his entire body was swallowed by the tribulation fire. It's not just Emperor Fire. It's the legendary tribulation fire. We're finished. The guy with the codename U was completely terrified. The tribulation fire was far more terrifying than he had imagined. The county governor of Scholars County, Ye Bowen, and the others who were outside heard the screams and suddenly smelled the Emperor Fire. Everyone was scared half to death and quickly retreated. However, as soon as they stopped moving, the Emperor Fire turned into the legendary tribulation fire. They panicked again and felt that they had not retreated far enough. In the end, they could only see a ball of fire burning fiercely in the center. Even the shadow of a person could not be seen. Bang! 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 Chu Yang's 6 clones held the cauldron again and reaped the lives of Viper, Scorpion, and the others, collecting their saint origin. He had already been burned by the tribulation fire once. This time, he was just going to experience the process. Therefore, neither he nor the 5 Hells Mother-Child Heavenly Demon Cauldron were afraid of these flames. This was the trump card that Chu Yang had used to deal with Qianzi and the others in the East Continent. He had been preparing for it for a long time, but Qianzi had never appeared. Tribulation Fire Burning Saint. This move was used in the end, but the Ice Kuan who had proposed this to him was no longer there. The Ice Kuan couldn't see all this and such a grand occasion. Chu Yang was dejected. The tribulation flames were terrifying, but Chu Yang was able to harvest them easily. In an instant, the remaining 14 saints and 13 saints were all slaughtered. Only Qianzi was left. The tribulation fire was a type of transformation of the lightning tribulation. Under the tribulation fire, everything was destroyed and turned into ashes. However, Qianzi was able to withstand it. Before he was weakened, Chu Yang did not dare to make a move. He could only wait. Qianzi's outer moon and inner sun protected his entire body. As the tribulation fire descended from the sky, his identity as an outer heaven demon was completely exposed. Billowing demonic chi soared into the sky and enveloped the surroundings. Time passed little by little, but Qianzi still showed no signs of defeat. The outer moon was quickly burned, followed by the inner sun, and then Qianzi himself. His expression was constantly changing. One moment, it was as if he was in an endless hell, suffering endless torment. The next moment, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. After a few times, his panicked expression gradually calmed down. In the end, he slowly calmed down. Chu Yang also noticed the abnormality, but he didn't care. No matter what price he had to pay today, Qianzi must die. Wild dog, should I thank you for your lightning tribulation? If you hadn't borrowed the power of the heavens to burn me with tribulation fire, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to step into the so-called earthly sovereign realm of your heavenly soul world. Qianzi allowed the tribulation fire to burn him. With his hands behind his back, he stared at Chu Yang without a trace of emotion. In order to thank you, after I advance to the earthly sovereign realm, I will definitely kill you. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The void behind him suddenly trembled and then distorted. Following that, 6 black holes appeared, hanging side by side behind him. Chapter 2255. 6 black holes appeared behind Qianzi. This meant that he had touched the threshold of the earthly emperor realm, reincarnation. The earthly emperor realm did not fall into reincarnation. Life and death were determined by oneself. This was the most basic. The earthly emperor realm had gradually broken away from the system of the heavenly Tao, drifting outside the heavenly Tao. Gradually, the heavenly Tao's binding power weakened. The fact that the earthly emperor realm was not bound by reincarnation was one of the most obvious signs. The earthly emperor realm was measured according to reincarnation. The earthly emperor realm had a total of 9 realms, each reincarnation stage. After passing through 9 reincarnations, one would reach the 9th level of the earthly emperor realm. Once one reached the earthly emperor realm, one would be immortal and indestructible. Chu Yang's expression did not change much. Although he did not know how Qianzi comprehended the mystery of the earthly emperor realm in such a short time, he was not surprised. Qianzi was not a fool. Not only was Qianzi not a fool, but he was also an extremely intelligent person. If people knew that he used 20 saints to kill Chu Yang, they would definitely laugh at him. However, not only did Qianzi make such a joke, he also killed Bing Kuan. 20 saints. If Bing Kuan was prepared, he would not have died. However, Bing Kuan was dead. Bing Kuan was dead. No matter how powerful Qianzi was, it did not matter to Chu Yang. He only wanted a result. He must kill this dog. Qianzi and the 20 saints would all be buried with Bing Kuan today. It did not matter what kind of price he had to pay. Therefore, Chu Yang would not run away, nor would he feel afraid. The 6 black holes quickly changed. The first black hole suddenly shone with boundless light, as if it was a heavenly kingdom. The second black hole also shone with boundless light, but it was mixed with black devil chi. The third black hole was turbid at the bottom, and red dust billowed at the top. The fourth black hole emitted the roar of a beast. The fifth black hole emitted the sound of swallowing that never stopped. The sixth black hole emitted endless screams that never stopped. They represented the heavenly Tao, Asura Tao, human Tao, animal Tao, evil spirit Tao, and hell Tao. Qianzi's body was as black as charcoal, and there were still traces of flames jumping and burning on his body. Under the burning of the calamity fire, he was also seriously injured, but he managed to survive. He even comprehended the secrets of the earthly sovereign stage under the pressure of life and death. Those below the saint realm were all ants, and those below the earthly sovereign realm were basically all ant. Although there was only a difference of 1 realm between a saint and an earthly sovereign, the gap between the two was incomparably huge. Therefore, once Qianzi succeeded, it would be a metamorphosis of the essence of life. From then on, he would be even more powerful. Moreover, no matter how serious his injuries were, Chu Yang would definitely not be his opponent. Qianzi's charred body also began to change. The flames on his body were extinguished, and his injuries were healed. He returned to his original appearance. Then, he turned into a middle-aged man, and then an old man. In the end, after a short moment of death, it turned into a baby in the blink of an eye. Then, it quickly grew into a child, a teenager, and a young man. Once again, it returned to its original appearance. This was equivalent to experiencing life and death, a complete reincarnation. Chu Yang did not know how amazing it was. It was definitely not an easy task for an ordinary person to complete a reincarnation after advancing to the earthly sovereign stage. It could be said that there was a 90% chance of death. However, Qianzi had passed through it easily. If this speed was spread out, it would shock the world. Fast, it was too fast. Chapter 2256. Wild Dog, do you still want to struggle? Qianzi had gone through a reincarnation cycle. It was as if he had been reborn, and his injuries had all healed. However, his face was even paler, and his weakness was obvious. He had consumed a lot of energy, and his earthly emperor realm was still unstable. However, no matter how bad his condition was, it was more than enough for him to kill Chu Yang. At the end of the road, there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. Qianzi had been in a hopeless situation, but the situation had been reversed. It was as if he had entered heaven from hell. Of course, he was happy and happy. 19 out of the 20 saints had died, which only meant that his judgment was correct. He was also very wise. As long as Chu Yang was dead, all the bad things would become good. What are you happy about? Chu Yang looked at all this coldly. There was no fluctuation in his emotions. His whole person was extremely cold. It was as if he had turned into Jing Wuming. He looked like a walking corpse. Wild Dog, what are you despising and disdaining? Qianzi's voice was weak, but it was still strong and contemptuous. The corner of his mouth curled into a cruel smile. Do you want me to clearly feel how angry and sad you are now? Ice Kuan! Chu Yang was suddenly stabbed. He suddenly trembled, and his eyes shone fiercely. Dog, am I not cruel enough to you? Cruel? Ha! Qianzi laughed. However, it only lasted for a while, and he couldn't continue. He was too weak. This time, he had used up too much of his origin to forcefully break through to the earthly emperor realm. After killing Wild Dog, he needed a lot of replenishment and recovery. Otherwise, it would leave a great trouble in the future. However, he continued to provoke Chu Yang. Wild Dog said that you were smart and amazing, but now it seems that you are just a fool. You don't have much ability. But you pretended to be great everywhere. Now you have caused the death of your loved ones. Are you happy now? Was that so? Chu Yang's mood suddenly fluctuated. Scenes of the past appeared in his mind. Was he trying to show off too much? Wasn't he being too arrogant? You don't even know how to protect yourself. The answer seemed to be obvious without a doubt. He was indeed too flamboyant, and such a result would come sooner or later. What's wrong? Why aren't you talking anymore? Qianzi was even more sarcastic. Did I hit your sore spot? How do you feel now? I feel great. Chu Yang's heart was filled with self-reproach. His expression suddenly turned ferocious. I will definitely make you feel great too. Rumble. As soon as he finished speaking, the heavens and earth suddenly shook again. The dark sky suddenly lit up again, as if there were layers of flames. Yi Boren, the county chief of Scholar County, and the others had been waiting outside for a while and thought that the battle was over. They were flying over quickly when they heard the rumbling of thunder. They looked up at the sky and their eyes widened in shock. In the sky, clusters of 7-colored flames, chaotic flames or flames of a single color, once again filled the sky. The flames illuminated the heaven and earth, spreading a kind of pressure that made people feel horrified. Thump, thump, thump. All of them reined in their horses at the edge of a cliff and quickly stopped. They even directly fell down like a huge hammer hitting the ground. The second level of the Nirvana realm. This is the second heavenly tribulation. Qianzi's weak voice suddenly became strong, but it was trembling. A look of shock appeared on his pale face. Rumble! Chu Yang's body was ignited. Countless flames sprang out from his body, and there was also a continuous and extremely loud sound. It was as if there was a prehistoric giant beast running in his body. Chapter 2257. It was vigorous and vast to the extreme. Chu Yang's strength was rapidly increasing. It was only the Nirvana realm, but his strength had increased by so much. Qianzi was shocked. Laugh, continue to be sarcastic and sarcastic. You dog, learn from me to provoke others. Don't disappoint me. Chu Yang regained his cold and indifferent expression. But he gnashed his teeth in anger as he spoke every word. Ah! Qianzi had no time to respond. The wild dog's lightning tribulation was even fiercer than the first one. It was impossible to dodge. The tribulation fire fell on his body again. He was ignited and burned again. The burning pain made his face contort and he kept screaming. It wasn't that he didn't respond. Behind him was the 6 paths of reincarnation. They were like 6 black holes that blocked most of the tribulation fire and extinguished the tribulation fire on his body. Chu Yang looked at all this and couldn't help but think of the ice Kuan. Kuan is right. My tribulation fire has already far exceeded the norm. Not only can the saints not escape from the tribulation, but even the earthly sovereign realm can't avoid it. The tribulation fire was extremely fierce and ended even faster than the first one. Although Qianzi was burned black again and his body was constantly emitting the smell of burnt flesh and his body was convulsing, he still managed to survive. However, the thing he was worried about happened again. Rumble! Above the sky, there was another loud sound. Everything was just like before. Endless heavenly fire fell again and burned him continuously, causing him to fall into endless suffering. It was as if he would never wake up from a nightmare. Suffering again and again made him extremely weak. He didn't have the strength to fight back. His condition was extremely bad, and he could only bite the bullet and hold on. 2nd level of the Nirvana realm. 3rd level of the Nirvana realm. 4th level of the Nirvana realm. At the 6th level of the Nirvana realm, Chu Yang had passed through the 6 stages of heavenly tribulation. He had killed 13 saints and used up all the origins he had obtained. He only stopped when he ran out of energy. It was extremely terrifying. The 13 saint essences were used as fuel to form a driving force, but it only allowed him to break through to the 6th level of the Nirvana realm. Moreover, during this process, he even tried his best to prevent the consumption of the saint essences above Wendao. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to break through to the 6th level of the Nirvana realm. Qianzi was like an ancient tree that had been burnt to a crisp. He stood there motionlessly, and no one knew if he was dead or alive. However, the 6 black holes behind him were still there. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 5 mother-child heavenly demon cauldrons revolved around Chu Yang like 6 stars, protecting him as he moved forward. Tap, tap, tap. He finally arrived in front of Qianzi, but Qianzi still didn't move at all. Bang! Chu Yang wielded the female cauldron and smashed it down. It was as though he was hugging a mountain as he smashed it down. The void trembled as buzzing sounds rang out unceasingly. When the cauldron landed on Qianzi, it was as though it had landed on a piece of tofu. Qianzi exploded into pieces. There was no flesh and blood, no broken bones flying in the air. There was only a cloud of murky black air that swept out and quickly gathered together. Then, Qianzi reappeared. At the same time, the 6 black holes shook violently and suddenly erupted with a huge suction force. It devoured Chu Yang's 5 mother-child heavenly demon cauldrons at an incomparably fast speed. In a flash, the 6 cauldrons had disappeared. At this moment, Qianzi's eyes suddenly opened. On his charred face, they were extremely bright. He stared at Chu Yang and said, "Wild dog is useless. You can't kill me." After I used the 6 paths of reincarnation to control the 5 mother-child heavenly demon cauldrons, you are just an ant in front of me. No matter how weak and powerless I am, you can't kill me. Do you understand? Everyone below the saint realm was an ant. A Nirvana realm martial artist couldn't kill a saint, just like how an ant couldn't kill a human. An earthly sovereign realm martial artist was even more terrifying. Although Chu Yang was powerful and might be able to deal with a saint, he definitely couldn't deal with an earthly sovereign realm martial artist like Qianzi. This was the truth. The difference between realms was an insurmountable gap. Chapter 2258. At this moment, Qianzi was like a heavily injured soldier on the battlefield, while Chu Yang was just an ant. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't kill this heavily injured and immobile soldier. This was the common sense of martial arts. It was an insurmountable gap. The difference between the two was too great. However, Chu Yang wasn't a person who followed common sense. If he wanted to overcome such a huge gap, it wasn't impossible. Bastard, where do you get your confidence from? Chu Yang sneered again and again. Why do you have to play the game of outwardly fierce but inwardly cowardly? Don't you know very well that such tricks are useless in front of me? Ha! Qianzi wanted to laugh and mock, but he didn't have the strength to do so. Wild dog, please, as you wish. Chu Yang's killing intent rose. He suddenly roared, "Kneel down for me!" With a plop, Qianzi's charred body knelt on the ground. His heart shrank and his mind buzzed. He was extremely shocked. The power of Wendao. He instantly knew Chu Yang's method and suddenly remembered the fatal flaw. According to Chu Yang's Nirvana realm cultivation, there was no way he could kill him or even consume his earthly emperor's origin. However, he wasn't sure about the power of Wendao. What scared him the most was that Wild Dog's power of Wendao seemed to have undergone a qualitative change during the battle. Even though he was an earthly emperor, he was still suppressed by Wild Dog's power of Wendao. Such an improvement was too shocking. How did Wild Dog do it? Crack! When Chu Yang said the word behead, the power of Wendao surged. An executioner appeared in front of Qianzi. It raised a large saber with a ghost head and chopped down. With a thud, Qianzi's head fell to the ground and rolled on the ground. The power of Wendao caused great damage to Qianzi. He felt extreme pain when his head was chopped off. Son of a bitch, advancing to the earthly emperor realm is indeed a good thing. In this way I can kill you 10,000 times. I will let you taste all the tortures. Under the effect of the earthly sovereign's origin, Qianzi's body exploded. When he reappeared, Chu Yang's words were as cold as ice, making him shudder. Such a small amount of consumption could indeed kill him 10,000 times. In the end, he would definitely be killed. 5 horses' dismemberment. The neighing of horses immediately resounded in this world. Chu Yang spat out 4 words, and his words were the law. Under the effect of the power of Wendao, Qianzi was immediately torn apart by 5 horses. He deeply felt the pain of being torn apart by 5 horses. The 5 horses ran in 5 different directions. He could clearly feel that his flesh, tendons, and bones were being torn apart. His head could even see his torso being torn apart and his limbs being torn apart. He screamed miserably. The damage to his body was just an illusion. The earthly sovereign's origin was the real thing. If the earthly sovereign's origin was not touched, even if Chu Yang killed him 10,000 times, he would not feel anything, let alone feel any pain. Chu Yang was just wasting his energy. Fighting with the illusion was like fishing for the moon in the water. It was extremely stupid. However, his earthly sovereign's origin was damaged by Chu Yang's power of Wendao. Everything was different now. Perhaps he would experience all the cruel tortures in the world before dying tragically. Burning, chopping at the waist, cutting him into pieces. None of the tortures mentioned by Chu Yang were repeated. Qianzi had really experienced hundreds of tortures. It was as if he had fallen into an endless hell. He would rather die than live. In the end, he was completely desperate and broke down. Before Chu Yang could speak, he rushed to say, "Please, please, give me a quick death. Dong. Dong." Chapter 2259. Ouch! In an instant, Chu Yang began to vomit crazily. His internal organs were churning as if he was going to vomit them out. The torturers were suffering a fate worse than death. Those who were watching felt extremely uncomfortable. Only those who were heartless could watch calmly as a person was tortured like a beast. Therefore, this was not only Qianzi's release, but also Chu Yang's release. At this point, the origin energy of the 20 saints had been taken away. Their spiritual souls had been extracted and they were all dead. Chu Yang also left in an instant. This was not what he wanted to encounter. However, it all happened in such a day. His mind was in a mess. He could not calm down for a long time. It should be over. Yi Boran and the others in the periphery heard the horrifying screams coming from within. They were already numb and had goosebumps all over their bodies. Therefore, they did not dare to barge in and could only wait outside. After the screams had completely disappeared, they made such a guess. Then, they carefully entered. When they saw the devastated battlefield, they could not help but gasp. The landscape had been completely changed. The ground was burned like firewood. The soil that was not completely burned was like charcoal. Large pits were burned in the ground. More than a dozen corpses that emitted the aura of saints were scattered everywhere. Among them, there was even a corpse that emitted the aura of the earthly sovereign realm. 19 saints and an earthly sovereign realm expert are all dead. What kind of battle is this? Yi Boran and the others soon realized that the surrounding landscape was not that badly damaged. After all, there were 19 saints and an earthly sovereign realm expert. Such a degree of destruction was nothing compared to the battle here. Who are the two sides? Who do the 19 saints and the earthly sovereign realm expert belong to? A huge question immediately popped up in their minds. The aura of the extraterrestrial demon. Among the 20 corpses, 10 of them have a strong aura of the extraterrestrial demon. Yi Boran, the county chief of number 1 county, finally said after several confirmations. Everyone else was stunned. Ma Kongquan, who was at the side, was also completely shocked. County Governor, you mean to say that the 10 saints of the outer heaven demons and the saints of our heavenly soul world had just fought here? I don't know either. Yi Boran shook his head. If that was the case, it would be a dereliction of duty for him not to make a move when he was at the periphery. Then, he shuddered and said, the other 10 corpses also have the aura of the demons from beyond, but they are more deeply hidden. Perhaps. Speaking of this, he paused. He felt that the reason why the aura of the extraterrestrial devil was almost undetectable on the 10 corpses was not because it was hidden too deeply, but because it had almost been washed away. Such a discovery shook his heart deeply, to the point that he didn't dare to rashly voice his guess. Once such a thing was confirmed, it would mean that there were many otherworldly demons hiding in the central region. The consequences were too severe. Yi Boran didn't even dare to think about it. County Chief, according to what you said, 19 otherworldly demons and an earthly sovereign realm expert were ambushing someone here? Hearing such a guess, Yi Boran shuddered. He was shocked and his heart was in turmoil. It can't be him, right? This him was Chu Yang. According to the time, Chu Yang should have arrived at the county capital. Chapter 2260. The literary path is just like the martial path, it has the power to turn the world upside down. If this becomes a reality, then wouldn't the strength of the heavenly spirit realm increase greatly? The more Yi Boran thought about it, the more likely it was. But Lu Xuanhuan was surrounded by 19 saints and an earthly sovereign. How could he escape unscathed? The big question popped up again. For a moment, He was like an ant on a hot pan, anxious to the extreme. One moment he wanted to report this matter, the next moment he hesitated, unable to make a decision for a long time. Whether or not the one ambushed by the demons was Lu Xuanhuan, I can't be sure. If I rush to this conclusion, I'm afraid it will cover up the truth. Also, maybe the demons don't even know who Lu Xuanhuan is. If I report this to the Imperial Court and the demons hiding in the Imperial Court find out, then I'll be a sinner. Let's wait and see. After weighing the pros and cons, Yi Boran finally decided to bide his time and wait for the Imperial Court's people to come. The Imperial Court's people should be sent by Duke Jiu, because Zhuangyuan County was closer to the Grand Capital, and Duke Jiu was in the Grand Capital. Duke Jiu was someone Yi Boran trusted and admired a lot. He felt that Lu Xuanhuan's matter should be handled by Duke Jiu. The officers and soldiers of Zhuangyuan County began to move out in groups to protect the battlefield. The people of Zhuangyuan County also swarmed out. This time, the movement was too big, almost unprecedented. Zhuangyuan Mountain was completely destroyed. How could people not pay attention? Move, move. Get out, all of you get out of here. If you don't get out, you deserve it. Because a group of people had arrived on horseback, 7 or 8 of them were rampaging through the crowd. Immediately, there was a big commotion in the crowd of onlookers. Immediately, there were screams, cries, and even screams. Some people were unable to dodge in time and were directly knocked away, or even knocked to death. The crowd was riding their horses without any regard for the law, but no one dared to make a sound. The leader of this group of people was a young man in his early 20s. There was a faint scar on his forehead, as if it was going to cut his entire forehead open. When one looked at that scar, they couldn't help but think that half of his head was going to be cut off. The lines on this person's face were also very tough, as if they were carved out by a knife or an axe. His gaze was sharp and he was clad in armor. His baleful aura was threatening. As soon as he arrived, a dense killing intent swept out, and the crowd retreated like a surging tide. There wasn't a single person within a 30 m radius. Beside the young man, there was a young man who looked like he had been drinking too much. He sniffed lightly and said hatefully, "Ma Kongquan, that bastard is here. One day I'll definitely teach him a lesson." There weren't many people who could grit their teeth as much as Ma Kongquan, and even fewer people who could instantly sense the remnants of Ma Kongquan's aura, and this person was Zhu Yu. "Third brother, Uncle Ma has lived and died with our father. Although he doesn't get along well with us, it shouldn't be to that extent." The young man with the baleful aura smiled. Although he didn't like Ma Kongquan, he also didn't want to have a bad relationship with Ma Kongquan. "Second brother, you don't know. Although I care about our father's relationship, that bastard Ma Kongquan doesn't care at all." Zhu Yu immediately told him about the matter with Chu Yang. At first, the young man didn't pay much attention, but when he heard that Lu Xuanhuan came from the East Continent, his sharp eyes immediately swept over and asked sternly, "Third brother, are you sure that lowly commoner came from the East Continent? What's wrong, second brother? Is there something wrong with that?" Zhu Yu didn't understand. "Just tell me, isn't it?" "Of course." "Ha ha." The young man suddenly laughed loudly and said with great joy, "Third brother, you might have brought me a great opportunity." Zhu Yu was even more confused. She couldn't see any fortuitous opportunity at all. How could a lowly commoner bring a great opportunity to the young marquis? Chapter 2261. The divine Arrow Marquis, as the name suggests, was bestowed with the title of Marquis due to his exceptional archery skills. However, a Marquis in the remote Zhuangyuan County naturally didn't have much status or power. Of course, this was relative to the entire Zhongzhou. In the Zhuangyuan County, the divine Arrow Marquis was the tyrant and Yi Boran couldn't control him at all. The example was obvious. Hana Mingji and Zhu Yu rode their horses here, and didn't care about the death of someone. The people were angry but didn't dare to say anything. As for this Hana Mingji, not only was he tyrannical, he was also a ruthless person with a strong murderous nature. He had narrowly escaped death many times on the battlefield. Second brother, can you explain it to me more clearly? I'm almost confused. Zhu Yu was completely at a loss. He. Hua Mingji smiled and then said, Third brother, have you heard of the Divine Fragrance Girl? Divine Fragrance Lady. Zhu Yu's pair of eyes immediately lit up. He didn't hide his greed and even swallowed his saliva. Then, he exclaimed in a dreamy tone, Divine Fragrance Lady, how could I not know? Then, he suddenly exclaimed, Second brother, you're thinking about the Divine Fragrance Lady? I still have some self-awareness. Such a woman isn't someone I can touch. Hana Mingji's sharp eyes lit up as if something was crazily growing in the depths of his eyes. Finally, he said faintly, One day, such a woman will belong to me, Hana Mingji. Second brother, you scared me. Zhu Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Hana Mingji looked at Zhu Yu with disdain and said, The reason why I told you about the Divine Fragrance Lady is because I wanted to say that a lowly eastern wilderness man is the Divine Fragrance Lady's fiancé. This matter has already caused a stir in the capital, and it's the same in Taijing. What, a lowly eastern wilderness man is the Divine Fragrance Lady's fiancé? How was this possible? Zhu Yu was shocked once again. She simply couldn't believe it. How could a woman like this have such an unbearable fiancé? As for the eastern wilderness, he almost didn't know anything about it. The only reason he knew about it was because he was in Zhuangyuan County. People from the East State would definitely have to pass through Zhuangyuan County to enter Zhongzhou. Second brother, are you talking about Lu Xuanhuan? He's most likely that bastard from the eastern wilderness? After a moment of shock, Zhu Yu finally understood what was going on. Right now in the Middle Continent, it was unknown how many people wanted to take that lowly life. Not bad. Hana Mingji nodded and said, Third brother, based on your description and my intuition, that person is very likely to be that lowly one. I've heard that that lowlife is very good at concealing himself and hiding himself. Furthermore, he is extremely exceptional. After a pause, he added, If that Lu Xunhuan is really that cheap, then it's normal for you to lose to him. In Zhu Yu's mind, she went through everything that had happened between her and Chu Yang. He still didn't believe that Chu Yang could be so shocking as to be able to activate the Book of Songs in an instant. Therefore, he must have been able to activate the Book of Songs before. Those refugees in the East State or the Eastern Wilderness would never pay attention to the literary path, but that lowly Lu Xuanhuan did. This meant that he was connected to Zhongzhou. When he thought about the Divine Fragrance Lady, everything seemed to suddenly connect. It must be the Divine Fragrance Lady who told that lowlife all this. After Zhu Yu told this to Hana Mingji immediately pounced on him like a ferocious tiger, his extremely sharp gaze fixed on him. Visible rings of blood-colored ripples rippled out from his eyes. Hana Mingji's steed reared up, neighing as a shocking wave of killing intent swept out. Chapter 2262. Zhu Yu couldn't help but shiver in fear. What a terrifying aura! He's about the same as me, just a 9th-level Transcendence Realm cultivator. Why is he so scary? Those who've been on the battlefield are indeed different. With such a huge difference, Zhu Yu finally believed that this was the answer. Third brother, where is Lu Xuanhuan now? Cough, cough, cough. Zhu Yu coughed. Second brother, slow down. I told you to speak, so you speak. He's either on the way to the county city or already there. As long as we find Ma Kongquan, we should be able to find that bastard. Zhu Yu could only tell the truth. When Hana Mingji withdrew his aura, he realized that he was sweating. You guys, send people to wait for that bastard at the city gate. If he comes, report to me immediately. You guys keep a close eye on Ma Kongquan. Once you find that bastard, report to me immediately. Got it? Hannah Mingji was like a general giving orders. It was as if a great opportunity was right in front of him, and today was the day for him to succeed and become a hero of the world. It was as if his blood was boiling and his entire body was about to ignite. Zhu Yu also left. He had to cooperate with the artist to draw Chu Yang's portrait. 3 days later, due to the arrival of the big shots from the imperial court, the matter became more intense. The discussions became more heated as well. Many people faintly heard that this had a lot to do with the demons from beyond the heavens. On the 4th day, Chu Yang stepped into the county city under the setting sun. Although he immediately noticed that there was a huge movement at the city gate after discovering him, he didn't care. After 3 days, his mood had more or less adjusted. However, because he was still depressed and lazy, he didn't want to move at all. He had thought about Bing Kuan's death for a long time. As Qianzi said, he had a lot to do with it. If he hadn't been so flamboyant, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. He would try his best to change himself, but he did not feel that he could completely change himself. Although he clearly knew that there was a lot of helplessness in life, and that many people with great abilities had to endure, his nature dictated that he was destined to be such a person. Chu Yang was strolling on the busy streets of the county city. He subconsciously sent a voice transmission to his own grotto heaven, Kuan Kuan. However, halfway through his words, he realized that the ice Kuan was no longer there. After a moment of desolation, he felt extremely lonely. The bustling scene in front of him made him feel even more lonely. He tried his best to think of other things. He thought of Xiao Guai, the parrot, his big brother Chu Fei, the saint child of Zither Sound, the silver wolf, and finally Shangguan Lan's beautiful face. I hope that sentence is true and that Kuan Kuan still has a chance to come back to life. Master, I'm not necessarily going to die. Until now, Chu Yang was still not sure if this sentence was true. He hoped it was true. After that, he found that he didn't have much to do. He just had to marry Shangguan Lan. When that time came, he could completely relax. Unfortunately, it was not easy to marry Shangguan Lan. Chu Yang was bored to death as he walked on the streets, looking at the noisy crowd. Later on, he followed Yi Boran's letter and went to look for Yi Boran. However, Yi Boran was not there because of what happened at Zhuangyuan Mountain. Chu Yang had actually heard a lot about this matter. The people of the county city seemed to know that what happened at Scholar's Mountain was related to the demons from beyond the sky. Qian Zi and the others were indeed from the world of gods. Chapter 2263. Yi Boran wasn't here, but Ma Kongquan was. Ma Kongquan was overjoyed to see Chu Yang, and his worries seemed to have disappeared. Ma Kongquan bluntly asked if Chu Yang was the one who was ambushed by the demons from beyond the heavens on Zhuangyuan Mountain, and if it was because of Chu Yang's literary cultivation. Chu Yang naturally denied it. It was better if Ma Kongquan didn't know about his secrets. As for Ma Kongquan's reminder, he kept it in mind. The literary path could have the same power as the martial path, and this had a far-reaching effect. Therefore, he even had the impulse to change his appearance and identity. However, it was difficult to find a reliable one, and he could only give up. As for the examination of the literary school, Ma Kongquan answered Chu Yang's questions one by one. It didn't sound difficult, but the examination took 3 days, and there were many aspects involved. In the end, Ma Kongquan brought Chu Yang to familiarize himself with the county city. The two of them chatted as they walked, and it could be said that they were talking cheerfully and wittily. From time to time, they attracted the attention of the ladies. When a delicate and beautiful woman stole a glance at Chu Yang, she was discovered by Chu Yang. Her face turned red as if it was on fire. Then, the sound of hoofbeats could be heard. Many people's cries of alarm could also be heard along with the sound of things being knocked over. The divine Arrow Marquis' son is here. Everyone, get out of the way. Quick, 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 if we don't get out of the way, we'll lose our lives. The crowd was also in a state of chaos in an instant. Soon, the cries of the children entered Chu Yang's ears. When he looked over, he saw a group of 18 people on horseback running unscrupulously on the street, and he frowned unhappily. Ma Kongquan's brows furrowed as well, revealing a displeased expression. Gallop, gallop, gallop. The 18 riders didn't have any intention of slowing down. Before they reached Chu Yang, a gust of wind swept over, and the 18 riders neatly stopped in front of Chu Yang and Ma Kongquan. But, without any warning, a horsewhip suddenly struck towards Chu Yang's head and face like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, a roar poured into Chu Yang's ears. You are that lowly Lu Sun Huan, right? But Chu Yang didn't see how Chu Yang moved, but he grabbed the horsewhip in his hand. Chu Yang's anger flared up in his heart. He coldly stared at this person, and immediately saw his face. He had a pair of cold and sharp eyes. There was a knife scar on his forehead, and he was wearing a suit of armor. This person was extremely swift and fierce. At this moment, this person was looking down on his head, looking down on him. He caught sight of Zhu Yu from the corner of his eye, and understood everything. Whoa! The sound of sobbing suddenly came from not far away. Chu Yang looked over and saw a woman holding a 7 or 8-year-old child, crying bitterly. He felt that the child's breath was rapidly weakening, and his pupils couldn't help but shrink. He immediately stretched out his hand, and a wave of mana rushed over. Lowly, I asked you a question, didn't you hear me? Answer me. Hanamingji saw Chu Yang's indifferent expression, and completely disregarded him, and suddenly shouted, Lowly, if the person I knocked down is going to die, then it's me who wants to kill him. If you dare to save him, not only will I kill you, but I'll also slaughter your entire family. This was an incomparably lively street, but at this moment it was quiet, and there was no trace of life. Many people kept quiet out of fear, and looked at Hanamingji with fear. They were even more worried for Chu Yang. Chu Yang held the horsewhip in his hand, and directly ignored Hanamingji. He turned his head to Ma Kongquan and said, Is Yi Boran not going to do anything? Ma Kongquan's expression froze. If Chu Yang said such a thing in front of others, his uncle Yi would be in a difficult position, and his dignity would probably disappear. Or, Yi Boran and the divine Arrow Marquis would have an intense conflict, but no matter what, it would be very troublesome for Yi Boran. Chu Yang understood his reaction, and he turned his head to look at Hanamingji. He smiled wickedly and said, Master, you're very unhappy right now. Do you know what that means? Boom. Chapter 2264. My lord is very unhappy right now. Do you know what that means? Such a sentence was like dropping a bomb. The people in the county city were dumbfounded. That kind of disdain, willfulness, and arrogance were all unbelievable. In the county city, there was actually someone who dared to say such words to the young Marquis of the Divine Arrow Manor. Was he tired of living? The Divine Arrow Manor was like a local tyrant in the Zhuangyuan County. The people had already tacitly approved of it. Therefore, no matter how much pain they suffered, they could only endure it silently. Resistance and revenge only resulted in ruthless suppression and slaughter. In the past few decades, such things had always happened and the result had never changed. The Divine Arrow Manor was still standing there, and no one could shake it. In the past few decades, there were naturally people who rebelled against the Divine Arrow Manor. However, there had never been anyone who was as arrogant and self-centered as Chu Yang. His lord was unhappy. Such a reason was definitely the most domineering reason that the people in the county city had ever heard. If people were only unhappy, they would definitely not provoke the Divine Arrow Manor. However, this scholar had warned the young Marquis of the Divine Arrow Manor because he was unhappy. Hana Mingji immediately suspected that he had misheard. His expression was extremely shocked, as if he was saying, "How could such a thing happen?" Ma Kongquan was also stunned. What was this new friend of his? He had never been able to describe him in words. Zhu Yu was also dumbfounded. Hana Mingji could be said to be a murderous demon king. He was extremely afraid of Hana Mingji. However, the refugee that he looked down on and called Hana Mingji a lowly demon king did not put him in his eyes at all. He even wantonly challenged his dignity in front of others. However, such a sentence was unprecedented in the Zhuangyuan County's county city. The bustling street became even more silent. There was not even the sound of breathing. Hana Mingji and his group of 18 horses seemed to have realized something and became extremely quiet. "Bastard, what did you just say? Say it again if you have the gut." With a popping sound, circles of blood-colored ripples continuously surged out from Hana Mingji's body. An endless baleful aura swept out, as if a surging wave of human blood was rushing towards everyone. In an instant, everyone felt hot blood splashing on their faces, as if they were being pulled into a pool of blood, a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. At this moment, Hana Mingji went berserk like a madman, a murderous demon king with bloodshot eyes. For Chu Yang, this was more or less the case. However, for the vast majority of people, Hana Mingji was currently the supreme god of death. Chu Yang sneered, "You're done being unreasonable. Are you going to act fierce in front of me? Are you going to use this method to prove that you're noble? A murderous demon king and a madman. This is your nobility." Each word was like a clap of thunder. It fell into the ears of the people in the Zhuangyuan County. Every one of them felt as if they had been struck by lightning. They trembled fiercely, and the astonishment in their eyes became even more intense. Some people were startled. They couldn't help but look at Chu Yang with a trace of worship. How many people had such courage? How many people had such courage? These people were supreme heroes. Even ghosts and gods would not dare to harm them. Good, good, good. Hana Mingji was so angry that he trembled. He was like a furious butcher on horseback. He stared at Chu Yang with murderous intent and said in a sinister tone, "Bastard, no one has dared to provoke the divine Arrow Marquis residents for decades. Today, you don't know what's good for you. You actually dared to offend the divine Arrow Marquis residents. I will definitely make you beg for death. I will torture you forever in fear." Chapter 2265. Along with his voice, he suddenly pulled the whip in his hand. Hana Mingji suddenly felt a huge force coming from the whip. This force was so huge and so fast that he didn't have time to react. He directly fell from the horse and landed face first on the stone slabs on the street. Bang! Blood splattered and the horse neighed in fright. Hana Mingji's posture was also extremely cool. After his face hit the stone slabs cracked and exploded, creating a small pit. He also bounced up as if his face had great elasticity. The crowd was dead silent. They thought that there would be a conflict, but they didn't expect that Chu Yang would be the first to make a move. They also didn't expect that the invincible divine Arrow Marquis residents would be defeated in an instant and in such a sorry state. Not only did everyone see the process, they also saw the result. Hua Mingji's face was badly mangled. His nose was broken and caved in. Most of the flesh on his face had been sliced off when he collided with the stone slabs and the ground. It was as if his skin had been peeled off, and it was also as if he had been smashed by a hammer. His face was beyond recognition. It was too horrible to look at. Hiss! The sound of the crowd sucking in cold air resounded in unison. Their trembling pupils fell on Chu Yang's body. "This guy is so fierce." Chu Yang looked at the small pit on the ground and touched his chin. He couldn't help muttering to himself, "The floor is so sturdy." He really felt the sturdiness of time and space in the central state again. If he was in the East State and his face hit the ground would definitely be more seriously injured. No, it's because you're just a weakling. When Chu Yang corrected himself and pointed at Hana Mingji's badly mutilated face, the crowd was so shocked that they burped as if they had eaten too much. They shook strangely and made strange sounds. Ma Kongquan's eyes widened like copper bells. His mouth was so round that it could swallow the sky. He was also shocked to the extreme. When Chu Yang became arrogant, he was also shocked. Hana Mingji felt extremely humiliated. He faced the sky and let out a long howl. His badly mutilated face turned sinister like an evil spirit. It was quite horrifying to look at. Rumble! A scarlet dermic power soared into the sky. Soon after, corpses emerged from his body one after another. The scene of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood appeared in midair. Bastard, I'm going to tear you apart. Hana Mingji was like a butcher who had been injured by a pig. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and charged over with his butcher knife. The saber in his hand had a blood groove. It was a saber used to kill enemies on the battlefield. A blood-red light flashed as the saber slashed down. A saber light of 300 feet long slashed down. A 9th-level Transcendence Realm Cultivator's saber light was only 300 feet long in the central state. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood? You usually scare people with stuff like that, don't you? Chu Yang hated this kind of person the most. He did not move from his spot. With a flick of his finger, a line of fire shot out. Soon after, it turned into a big fire. The 300-foot saber light was burned clean like paper. The saber with the blood groove was also burned away. Ah! Hana Mingji's hand holding the saber was also burned. He screamed like a pig. However, the moment he screamed, his hand was completely burned away. The flame continued to burn along his arm. Crack! He used his left hand as a saber and directly cut off his arm. What a terrifying flame! What kind of flame is this? Ma Kongquan and Zhu Yu's hearts trembled. Chu Yang's flame was too shocking. In front of such a flame, no matter how vicious Hua Mingji was, no matter how much hatred he had, it was useless. He was just like firewood in front of it. Chapter 2266. There was no doubt that it was the flames of Nirvana. However, Hana Mingji was already in the 9th level of the Transcendence Realm, and was only a step away from entering the Nirvana realm. Even if he encountered the flames of Nirvana, he shouldn't be so weak. Hana Mingji's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He was in excruciating pain and his pupils were trembling because he could understand the horror of that kind of flame the best. No matter how many methods he had, it was useless. He could only be burned and turned into ashes. However, he still had a fierce look on his face and the murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger. You're good like this. Thud. Chu Yang took a step forward. I'm afraid that you won't be unreasonable. I'm afraid that you won't be fierce, vicious, or vicious. As he spoke, he was already in front of Hana Mingji. Kill. Hana Mingji was not afraid of death. His hideous face was badly mutilated. Like a lone hero, he rushed over with his broken body. However, with a bang, Chu Yang's outstretched hand emitted a burst of flames. He instantly changed his form from fearless to cowardly and retreated in panic. You can continue to be fierce and evil, Chu Yang sneered. His big hand fell as if the sky was collapsing. With a rumbling sound, the sky and earth turned upside down. Everyone felt as if the world had been turned upside down. Sky flipping seal. How could Hana Mingji escape? His entire body was flipped over. His head and feet were slapped into the ground by Chu Yang. On the ground, only his blood-stained soles could be seen. That blood was Hana Mingji's own blood. The flames on it jumped and directly burned the soles of his shoes. The smell of burnt flesh instantly spread out. With a bang, the ground exploded. Hana Mingji seemed to have broken free from a cage. His face was smashed and his head was broken. Blood rolled down as he continuously slapped the flames on his feet and screamed. He couldn't extinguish the flames no matter how hard he tried. His slapping hands were also burned, making him look even more miserable. But Chu Yang easily grabbed Hua Mingji's throat and lifted him up. He could clearly feel Hua Mingji's body convulsing with his big hand. Hana Mingji's flaming hand struggled and slapped Chu Yang's hand, but it was useless. No, there was. The flames on his hands had been extinguished, but the soles of his feet were still sizzling and emitting black smoke, and the smell of burnt flesh. Cough, 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 cough. In the blink of an eye, Hana Mingji was almost powerless to struggle. She opened her mouth wide, like a fish out of water. She breathed with difficulty. Her tongue also stuck out, and the whites of her eyes rolled up. You want to kill me?" Chu Yang's face was expressionless, and the strength in his hands did not weaken at all. At this moment, Hana Mingji suddenly realized that Chu Yang really wanted to kill him. Killing someone on the street. Even though he was the second son of the divine Arrow Marquis, and was a local tyrant in the Zhuangyuan county, and no one dared to offend him, he still had to be killed. A ruthless person, this is a ruthless person. No matter who you are, if I want to kill you, you will die. Hana Mingji finally knew that he had met someone who was even more tyrannical than him, someone who was even more lawless. This kind of person was not evil, but he was even more fearless. He had seen this kind of person before, and he also deeply understood the nature of this kind of person. Therefore, he was completely terrified. All of his pretenses, arrogance, tyranny, viciousness, cruelty, murderous, and so on, were stripped away like a coat, exposing his fragile heart. I am the son of the divine Arrow Marquis. You will also die if you kill me. In his extreme panic, he actually said these words smoothly. If your father has any objections, I will kill your father. So unreasonable, so tyrannical. Hana Mingji's eyes bulged again. Brother Lu, stop. Ma Kongquan panicked. He rushed forward to save Hana Mingji, but he was heavily kicked by Chu Yang. Get lost. The words, get lost, were like thunder, directly gifted to him. Chu Yang did not give Ma Kongquan any face. Just like how Ma Kongquan was indifferent when he saw Hana Mingji charging his horse, he was also indifferent to Ma Kongquan's request. If Chu Yang had not acted earlier, that child would have been a dead man. Hana Mingji dared to kill, so how could he, Chu Yang, not dare to kill? Chapter 2267. Chu Yang wanted to kill Hana Mingji and sent Ma Kongquan flying with a kick. Every scene shocked the people of Champion's commandery. Some of them could not help but become agitated, gnashing their teeth in anger. It was as if the one strangling Hana Mingji was not Chu Yang, but them. Ma Kongquan was sent flying with a kick. He was stunned and confused. When he discovered that many people loathed and pained Hana Mingji, and even some people hated him because he wanted to save Hana Mingji, he suddenly became stunned. He finally understood why Chu Yang did not give him any face, why he was so angry at him. Perhaps he treated me as a friend before, but now he probably no longer recognizes me as a friend. How could Ma Kongquan not know what Hana Mingji and Hana Mingji's father had done in these past few years? But what had he done? He had done nothing. Instead, when Chu Yang wanted to do something, he had to step out to stop him. Ma Kongquan could not help but become absent-minded. If I were Hana Mingji's friend, I would advise him and not allow him to degenerate like this. If I could not persuade him, I would draw a clear line and cut off such an unrighteous person. At this moment, Ma Kongquan seemed to understand why Chu Yang had such astonishing accomplishments in the literary path, and why Chu Yang alone could display the power of the literary path that could rival the martial path. If Chu Yang knew, he would only say one thing, Ma Kongquan, you're overthinking things. Chu Yang was in a bad mood, and Hannah Mingji's actions had angered him. Swish! Suddenly, a sharp whistle rang out from the direction of the divine Arrow Marquis estate. Immediately after, a beam of divine light shot out, streaking across the sky and arriving in the blink of an eye. It went straight for Chu Yang's head, piercing through his left temple. By the time everyone realized it, it was already too late. Chu Yang was about to die, but they saw Hannah Mingji block in front of him. Phew! Many people let out a long sigh of relief, but the divine light suddenly went around and went straight for Chu Yang's vital point from the back again. However, Hannah Mingji followed him like a shadow and appeared right there. After repeating this several times, the divine light finally stopped in midair, and everyone could see that it was a divine arrow. After a few rounds of exchanges, even if Chu Yang did not have saint-level spiritual power or the five hells mother-child heavenly demon cauldron, it would have been very difficult for him to dodge, or he would have become a dead man. The person who attacked was extremely powerful and was extremely proficient in long-range attacks. From this, it could be concluded that this person's insight was extremely shocking, and the range of his vision was very far and wide. "You lowly thing, how dare you hurt my son?" A thunderous angry voice came from the direction of the divine Arrow Marquis estate. Immediately after, the sky shook violently, and a figure flew over from there. In the blink of an eye, he landed in midair. The person who came was thin and had sharp features. Although his face had matured and looked old, there was still a hint of fierceness on it. When Chu Yang saw him, the villains on the street appeared in his mind. This person was about 50 years old. He had a pair of fair hands and held a dark red longbow. He had one leg and a pair of eyes that were as sinister as a snake's. At this moment, he was staring coldly at Chu Yang. From his body, the aura of a saint instantly spread out. Almost everyone in the surroundings immediately knelt down after this person arrived. Only Chu Yang's slender figure stood proudly among them, not affected at all. There shouldn't be many people like this in the Zhuangyuan County, and the answer was obvious. The divine Arrow Marquis. The divine Arrow Marquis had come. Just when his son was about to be killed, he had come. It carried with it an unparalleled majesty, an overwhelming killing intent, and a will that forced everyone to submit to it. Chapter 2268. The heavens and earth were deathly silent. Many people seemed to have died. How could such an existence resist? That Lu Xuanhuan was probably going to die. "Bastard, let go of my son, and I'll let you kill yourself." The Marquis of Divine Arrow spoke. His voice was sharp, and rapid. It was like a sharp arrow that shot into Chu Yang's ears. An invisible force instantly spread out and acted on Chu Yang's body. Words were law. The means of a sage. Those below the sage level were ants. Ants couldn't resist their orders. Chu Yang didn't move or make a sound. He allowed that force to act on his body. His physical body had become a god, and the rules of the Wen Dao were woven on it. Such a force was directly blocked by his physical body. His physical body's immunity to magic power and rules was strengthened. It was directly raised to a higher level. It was actually useless. The Marquis of Divine Arrow's pair of cold eyes that were like a poisonous snake's became sharper and more domineering. It was as if they could pierce through the void. With a swoosh, they landed on Chu Yang's body. A layer of glittering treasure light was emitted from Chu Yang's body. When the gaze landed on him, it was directly reflected. This lowly thing is not simple. The Marquis of Divine Arrow's pupils finally couldn't help but shrink slightly. Such a person could resist the pressure of a sage before reaching the sage realm. Such a person was definitely extraordinary. Please continue your performance. Chu Yang finally spoke. However, this sentence was full of contempt and ridicule. Everyone was trembling with fear. Not only was Lu Xuanhuan not afraid of Hannah Mingji, but he was also not afraid of the Marquis of Divine Arrow. However, Hana Mingji was nothing compared to the Marquis of Divine Arrow. The Marquis of Divine Arrow was a sage. He had even made contributions on the battlefield and was conferred the title of Marquis. Lu Xuanhuan actually dared to act like such a person. In fact, everyone clearly knew that the Marquis of Divine Arrow's realm wasn't just a sage. He was originally at the Earthly Emperor realm. However, because he was seriously injured, it was said that he blocked an arrow for a noble. His cultivation had deteriorated greatly. Cough, cough, cough. In the air, the Marquis of Divine Arrow suddenly coughed violently. When he stopped coughing, the pressure he exuded became even more terrifying. His gaze was like a divine sword, and each of his words was like a blade. Bastard, do you want to have your entire family wiped out? Bang! The earth trembled. Chu Yang gave an incomparably straightforward answer, fiercely slamming Hana Mingji onto the ground. With a wah sound, Hua Mingji's body spasmed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Go on, old bastard, go on, Chu Yang said coldly, giving tit for tat. This, Ma Kongquan didn't know what to say anymore. In front of a saint, a marquis of the imperial court, Chu Yang actually dared to be so impudent. Everyone turned pale with fright, but for such an action, all that was left was admiration. They definitely didn't dare to do such a thing, and they didn't even dare to show the slightest disrespect to the Marquis of Divine Arrow. The Marquis of Divine Arrow's pupils constricted again. He had threatened Chu Yang with his family, but who would have thought that the other party would be so decisive as to smash his son half to death? He couldn't compromise, and he definitely wouldn't compromise. In his life, he had never compromised to that lowly person. He wouldn't this time, and he definitely wouldn't in the future. Bastard! The Marquis of Divine Arrow's voice became even sharper, as if it was tinged with blood and a terrifying scream. This is the last chance I'm giving you. Let go of my son, or else you won't be able to die even if you want to, and your entire family will suffer a fate worse than death. Do you know what this means? Bang, bang, bang! As soon as he finished speaking, miserable screams rang out. Chu Yang slammed Hana Mingji onto the ground, breaking his bones and tendons. He didn't stop until there was no more blood to spurt out. Every time Hana Mingji was smashed onto the ground, everyone's hearts couldn't help but thump. Chapter 2269. Old Bastard! Chu Yang met the Divine Arrow Marquis's sinister gaze and sneered. Are you going to show me the methods you used when you were a bad person? You're fierce, evil, and vicious. You're not afraid of death, so everyone is afraid of you, right? You haven't improved at all. You're really a disgrace to the hooligans. On behalf of the hooligans, I expel you from the Hooligan Association. From now on, you're removed from the association. They could accept the first sentence, but they really couldn't accept the second sentence. It sounded like Chu Yang was the ancestor of the hooligans. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that Chu Yang was too playful. It had become frivolous and funny. In fact, they didn't know that Chu Yang said this out of habit. If it was in the past, before the Ice Kuan died, it wouldn't be that bad. It's over, it's over. Brother Lu actually exposed Uncle Hua's background. Uncle Hua definitely won't let him off. Ma Kongquan was anxious. In the past, his father, Zhu Yu's father, and Marquis Divine Arrow were indeed hooligans on the street. This was also the past that the three of them tried their best to avoid. However, today, Chu Yang exposed them in front of everyone. The consequences were imaginable. Bastard, sure enough, the Divine Arrow Marquis erupted in the next moment. His face suddenly turned ferocious, causing the void to rumble. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were charging forward. Battle cries filled the air. Endless baleful aura and killing intent swept out, causing the sky to change color. Old bastard, it's useless for you to be so fierce. Do you not understand human language, or what? Chu Yang's long hair and sleeves fluttered in the wind. The strong wind hit his face, making his expression even colder. I'll kill you, you bastard! Bang! Chu Yang grabbed Hua Mingji and smashed him on the ground again. Pieces of his internal organs flew out. The Marquis of Divine Arrow, who was still in a ferocious state, stopped in his tracks. It's true. He just looks fierce and evil. If he dares to fight with his life, he's nothing but a dog fart. What bullshit, Divine Arrow Marquis. He's just scum. Everyone's eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Lu Xuanhuan was actually right. The Divine Arrow Marquis was nothing more than a hoodlum. However, many people knew very well that not everyone could remove the outer shell of the Divine Arrow Marquis. At the very least, no one had been able to do it in the past few decades. Today, Lu Xuanhuan had done it to such an extent. Old bastard, I'll take your head tonight. Just wait for your death. Chu Yang had the five hells mother-child heavenly devil cauldron, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the Divine Arrow Marquis. However, he couldn't reveal his trump card in front of others. He grabbed Hana Mingji, threw down these words, and left with a whoosh. The Marquis of Divine Arrow chased after him. Chu Yang's speed was extremely fast. Even if people chased after him, they simply couldn't catch up. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yang's figure disappeared. What happened after that was unclear. Rumble! A loud sound came from the front, followed by Chu Yang's voice. Old bastard, don't be in such a hurry to die. You'll die on time tonight. His voice was faint. Chu Yang seemed to have left extremely far away. When people realized that the Marquis of Divine Arrow didn't chase after him, he immediately went to save his son. At this moment, everyone understood what was going on. Chu Yang had probably tortured Hua Mingji to the brink of death, and then threw him out. If the Divine Arrow Marquis didn't save him, then his son would become a dead son. If he wanted to save him, it would be extremely difficult to catch Chu Yang. At this point, people could only sigh. Chu Yang's ability was astonishing. He was only at the Nirvana realm, but he didn't fear a saint. Moreover, if he wanted to escape, even a saint couldn't do anything. Chapter 2270. If the King of Hell wanted you to die at midnight, he wouldn't let you live until dawn. With the disappearance of Chu Yang and the Marquis Divine Arrow, this matter seemed to have come to an end for the time being. However, it was only at this moment that a huge reaction erupted. Chu Yang's final words had triggered everything. Ma Kongquan listened to the clamor and looked at Chu Yang's footprints on his lower abdomen. He remained silent for a long time. He suddenly felt a little absent-minded and confused. He didn't know how to react. Chu Yang wanted to kill the Marquis Divine Arrow. Although this was completely beyond his imagination, he wasn't too surprised. Chu Yang's attitude towards Hana Mingji had already determined the outcome. The Marquis Divine Arrow and his two sons had been accomplices to the evildoers in Zhuangyuan County all these years. This was an indisputable fact. Ma Kongquan knew this very well. He wasn't the only one. His father had also distanced himself from the Marquis Divine Arrow's residence. Of course, he and his father wouldn't stand out against the Marquis Divine Arrow's residence. After all, they still had some friendship. In Ma Kongquan's opinion, the word scram was the biggest difference between him and Chu Yang. He definitely didn't think that Chu Yang wanting to kill the Marquis Divine Arrow and Hana Mingji was a joke. Unfortunately, people weren't as certain as he was. That's Lu Xuanhuan, right? Taking the Marquis Divine Arrow's life at midnight. Doesn't this mean that the King of Hell wants you to die at midnight and won't let you live until dawn? What a boastful tone. I wonder if he can't kill the Marquis Divine Arrow. Now, I'm worried that he will be killed by the Marquis Divine Arrow. Lu Xuanhuan's tone is boastful, but he's also very capable. So many years have passed. Who could be like Lu Xuanhuan, punishing Hannah Mingji and cursing the Marquis Divine Arrow? Who would dare? Many people in the crowd fell silent when they heard such a loud question. That was indeed the case. No one in the Champion County dared to oppose the Divine Arrow Marquis. The county governor's manor was just a decoration. Who would dare to make a move against the Divine Arrow Marquis manor? It was even more so for ordinary people. No one had the courage to say no. They didn't even dare to be angry. They could only let the Divine Arrow Marquis manor do whatever they wanted. Fuck you! A burly man roared. Lu Xuanhuan was a hero just now. Who dares to call him a refugee? Who dares to call him a wretch? I'll be the first to disagree. Bullshit. What you're saying is bullshit. Lu Xuanhuan is a good man, and we're all cowards from Zhuangyuan County. Do you even need to say that? Many people's anger was ignited as they roared, "Tonight, regardless of whether Lu Xuanhuan can kill that old bastard Divine Arrow Marquis or not, just based on what he did just now, I admire him. If he asks me to do something that is within my power, if I refuse, then I am an animal. Tonight, no matter if he goes to the Divine Constabulary or not, whoever dares to scold me, I will tear his mouth off." That's right. Lu Xuanhuan spoke up for us and angrily beat up Hannah Mingji. He's more manly than anyone else. So it's understandable that he didn't go to the Divine Constabulary tonight to take that old bastard's head. Don't talk nonsense. Today, I'll let you know that if Lu Xuanhuan comes to my restaurant tomorrow, if I don't take a penny from him, you can come and beat my entire family to death. A merchant left these words and walked away with his hands behind his back. Immediately, the crowd erupted into an even louder clamor. The crowd was agitated. It was as if an extinct volcano was about to come back to life. Billowing smoke once again came out. Chapter 2271. Because of this matter, the capital of the Scholars' County never quieted down. There were more and more discussions, and it became more and more lively and clamorous. The streets and alleys were all talking about this matter. On this day, when the servants of the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion came out to be arrogant again, they were ambushed and killed in the busy city. When the officials of the county went to ask, everyone said they didn't know. Some people even put their hands on their hips and cursed the officials' 18 generations of ancestors. This was not without reason. Usually, when the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion killed people or casually killed people, the county governor's mansion did not react at all. But now they reacted quickly. Of course, many people could not calm down. When night was about to fall, Chu Yang sent a letter to the county capital, saying that he wanted to send the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion to the afterlife for 10 crimes. Immediately, all kinds of crimes of the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion were spread everywhere. There were not only 10 crimes, but hundreds and thousands of crimes. When Yi Boran heard the news, he rushed back as fast as he could. Seeing the situation out of control, he was helpless. He used all his strength to search for Lu Xuanhuan, but he could not find him at all. Yi Boran did not set up defenses in the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion. He did not think that Lu Xuanhuan would kill the Divine Arrow Marquis tonight. How could a saint be killed just because he wanted to? The Divine Arrow Marquis mansion did not need his protection. If he wanted to do so, the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion would be the first to disagree. Later, there was another news that Lu Xuanhuan was drinking wine and composing poems in a restaurant. Many people rushed there, but they did not find him. In the capital of Zhuangyuan County, there was no sleep tonight. At the second watch period, the city was still brightly lit. At this time, the largest restaurant in the county, the Zhuangyuan restaurant, spread the news that Lu Xuanhuan was drinking there. When many people rushed there, many people saw Lu Xuanhuan, who was also Chu Yang. There was a place that people paid special attention to, the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion. Many people were already waiting outside, waiting to see what would happen in the divine Arrow Marquis mansion tonight. Ma Kongchuan was one of them. Even Yi Boran was among them. In the divine Arrow Marquis residence, almost all the lights were extinguished. Only 2 or 3 places still had a faint light. This was the residence of Hannah Mingji. At this moment, Hannah Mingji finally woke up. The divine Arrow Marquis, Hannah Mingji's elder brother, Hua Mingrue, and many important figures of the divine Arrow Marquis residence were present. The things that happened today naturally shook the divine Arrow Marquis manor. How could they remain calm in such a situation when they were condemned by thousands and spurned by tens of thousands? Fa Kin. Hannah Mingji woke up and spoke weakly, breaking the silence. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by the Marquis Divine Arrow. I already know that you have done nothing wrong, Zhir. Even if that Lu Xuanhuan is not Chu Yang, you can do whatever you want because you are my son, Hua Yaozu's son. Do you understand? Yes, father. All the worries in Hannah Mingji's heart disappeared. As for the divine Arrow Marquis Hua Yaozu, every word he said was what he thought in his heart. Father. On the side, Hua Mingrue heard Hua Yaozu's words and immediately said without any scruples, Yi Boran came to warn me during the day. Should I kill him directly? He made a gesture of cutting his neck. No. The divine Arrow Marquis directly denied. Yi Boran is the governor of a commandery. If he dies, I can't afford to offend him. After a pause he added, also you should restrain yourselves for a while. After this is over, you should do what you did before. Yes, father. Hua Mingrue, Hannah Mingji, and the others replied in unison. Chapter 2272. How long until the third watch period? After a long silence, the divine Arrow Marquis suddenly asked. Marquis, there's about 30 minutes before the third watch period. Go and get an incense. Yes, Marquis. Soon, the incense was lit and the smoke rose in spirals. Time also passed silently. At this moment, many people suddenly became alert and widened their eyes to observe all the movements around the divine Arrow Marquis mansion. Bang, bang, bang. When the incense finished burning, the sound of the night watch came from outside the Marquis mansion. The third watch period had arrived. Ha ha! Hua Mingrue immediately laughed out loud and shouted outside the divine Arrow Marquis mansion, a lowly person will always be a lowly person. Just wait for your fate to be worse than death. Anyone who offends the divine Arrow Marquis mansion will go to the 18th level of hell and never be reincarnated. Ha ha! He laughed with contempt and arrogance. The laughter was clear and loud, and it resounded in the dark night. Immediately, everyone in the house couldn't help but laugh, making the laughter even louder. In the dark night, many people were disappointed. Yi Boran and Ma Kongchuan also let out a long sigh. Lu Xuanhuan still knew what was good for him and didn't act so rashly. The third watch period has arrived. You don't dare to come, but I'll definitely go and find you. Even if you hide in a rat's hole, I'll definitely dig you out and grind your bones to dust. Ha ha! Hua Mingrue wasn't satisfied yet. At the same time, he wanted to show the dignity of the divine Arrow Marquis. Then, he laughed out loud, and the contempt on his face was even more obvious. However, right after he said those words, he opened his mouth wide and started laughing loudly. Suddenly, he saw a person appear behind his father, the divine Arrow Marquis. The person did not make a sound. At first, he thought that he had seen wrongly, but soon he saw the person's face clearly. With a sneer on his face, he raised a big cauldron and smashed it at his father. It shouldn't be true. Father is a saint. How could he not notice that lowly person behind him? This must be my illusion. When his thoughts reached this point, blood splattered onto his face. Hot blood flowed down his cheeks, and he could clearly feel the warmth of the blood. In his eyes, he could clearly see his father's head exploding, his brain matter splattering everywhere, and his entire body exploding. Flesh and blood flew in all directions, and shattered bones flew in all directions, dyeing the room red. The divine arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, had a smile on his face just a moment ago. His expression was full of contempt, but in the next moment, he didn't even know how he died. From the beginning to the end, the divine arrow Marquis had not been able to react in time. He was blown up, and then his saint source energy was directly absorbed. His shattered flesh and blood could not be reassembled, and he was revived again. The Marquis of Divine Arrow died with his eyes wide open. At the moment of his death, he was completely deprived of that scream of pain. The person beside Marquis Divine Arrow also exploded and died. Hana Mingji was very close to his father, so he did not know how he died. When the loud rumbling sound completely erupted, Hua Mingrue realized that he was the only one left in the room. At this moment, he saw that person walking over with large strides with an indifferent expression on his face. Chu Yang. This person was naturally Chu Yang. He stared at Hua Mingrue coldly, and Hua Mingrue was so frightened that he staggered back. Who are you calling lowly? Who are you going to send to the 18th level of hell and never be reincarnated? Who are you going to turn into ashes this time? The 3 consecutive questions were all about Hua Mingrue's arrogant words from before. Now that he was questioned in return, he could not say a single word. His arrogant expression turned into fear. His body trembled like a sieve, and he could not summon any strength in his body. Father is a saint. He died just like that. At this moment, his only thought was, in the midst of helplessness and despair, he could not help but think of the same helpless and desperate faces that he had seen before. The only difference was that those faces were filled with anger. Did those people feel the same way before they died? This was Hua Mingrue's last thought. Chu Yang smashed down with the cauldron in his hand and killed him directly. Chu Yang was ruthless and merciless. He did not spare any of them. Before this, he had already investigated all the main members of the Divine Arrow Marquis residence. It would not be wrong to kill all of them 100 times. Whoosh! After leaving these words, he directly disappeared into the void. Chapter 2273. When the huge explosion resounded in the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion, the few lights that were still on were completely extinguished at this moment. Immediately, the lights in the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion lit up one by one. It was as if stars had suddenly appeared in the night sky. Soon after, the dense sound of footsteps, the sound of breaking through the air, and many other sounds intertwined. Suddenly, all the sounds disappeared. There was dead silence. The entire Divine Arrow Marquis residence seemed to have turned into a ghost domain in an instant. The flickering flames were the flickering willow, the wisps in the ghost domain. The Marquis is dead. The eldest young master is dead. The second young master is dead too. They're all dead, all of them. It was unknown who shouted first, but in an instant screams, exclamations, and extremely frightened voices burst out. Many voices mixed together and became a mess. The entire Divine Arrow Marquis mansion was completely in chaos. Hua Yaozu is dead. When Yi Boran, the county governor of Zhangyuan Commandery, heard the explosion, he originally wanted to rush in as soon as possible. However, he restrained such an impulse because such a huge explosion might not be Lu Xuanhuan's reckless attempt to assassinate Hua Yaozu. It might be something else. If he rushed in without understanding the situation, he was afraid that he would have a conflict with Hua Yaozu. At such a time, the conflict between the two was very likely to escalate. However, while he was still hesitating, the news of Hua Yaozu's death came. The Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu is dead. Yi Boran was not the only one who was in disbelief. Almost everyone around him was dumbfounded. The Divine Arrow Marquis was a marquis in the Jin dynasty. Although he did not have much real power and was only a marquis in name, he was still a marquis recognized by the imperial court. However, he had died in an instant. The divine arrow marquis death was not a natural death, but an assassination. Once this matter was heard by the emperor, Yi Boran did not know how big of a commotion it would cause. In addition, the divine arrow marquis was Hua Yaozu's backer, a supreme figure. This matter was even more out of control. Not only that, Hua Mingrui was dead. Hana Mingji was also dead. Boom. In a moment of desperation, Yi Boran was like a mountain, moving from stillness to action. In an instant, he reached the limit and directly crashed into the divine arrow marquis manor. Behind him, Ma Kongquan and the others also barged into the divine arrow marquis mansion amidst the chaos. Fast, so fast that it was inconceivable. However, after a huge explosion, the divine arrow marquis, Hua Yaozu, and his 2 sons were all dead. Was the cultivation of Saint Hua Yaozu just a decoration? Who could believe it? Who wouldn't be shocked? The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. The heavenly souls are at the mercy of the gods. When Yi Boran arrived, the blood, flesh, and bones splattered everywhere were imprinted in his eyes. Everywhere was blood red, as if he had arrived at a slaughterhouse. There was not a single person alive in the scene. It was as if a meteorite had crashed into an ordinary family. That ordinary family was completely annihilated. However, the divine arrow marquis residence was not an ordinary family. Who could kill the divine arrow marquis Hua Yaozu in one strike? Could it really be those extraterrestrial demons of the gods? Yi Boran's pupils trembled. The matter was originally very simple, but once the world of the gods got involved, it instantly became confusing and extremely complicated. The nature of this matter became even more serious, and the consequences were even greater and even more unimaginable. The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. The heavenly souls are at the mercy of the gods. Chapter 2274. The Marquis of Divine Arrow Hua Yao's ancestral heaven was infuriated, and the Jin dynasty allowed him to continue his evil deeds. On the contrary, the gods' world couldn't stand it anymore and killed him. How would the people of the heavenly spirit world view the Jin dynasty now? This was another kind of irony. The Jin dynasty did not cherish its own people, and the demons that were labeled as extraterrestrial demons took action because of this, severely punishing the scums and villains. The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. If the heavenly souls are not righteous, the gods will come. Yi Boran's mind was in a mess. Then, he repeated the same suspicion in his mind. Is it really the work of those otherworldly demons from the gods' world? He didn't believe that the otherworldly demons in the divine world would never be so kind. However, he couldn't rule out such a possibility. In addition, if he said that there was no such thing, then he had to produce conclusive evidence. It seemed like he also had a chance to destroy the words, "The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. If the heavenly souls are not righteous, the gods will come." But what use was that? The gods were at the mercy of the heavenly souls. If the heavenly souls were not righteous, the gods would come. It was impossible to hide such a saying. Perhaps this saying had already spread throughout the Zhuangyuan county. The death of the Marquis of Divine Arrow, Hua Yaozu, had probably been regarded as the death of the extraterrestrial demons. Due to the huge commotion caused by the officers of the county governor's manor, as well as the people who had been waiting outside the Divine Arrow Marquis manor, they had clearly heard the huge explosion, as well as the chaotic and panic scene in the Divine Arrow Marquis manor. As a result, they had obtained a lot of important information. Very soon, the Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, and his 2 sons were all killed. With the fastest speed, the news swept through the entire county. It even spread from the scholars' county to other places. The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. If the heavenly souls are not righteous, the gods will come. Good news, great news. The old bastard Marquis Divine Arrow and the two little bastards are all dead. Dead, dead. That old bastard Hua Yaozu is finally dead. Haha. It's good that he died, it's really good that he died. Demons from outer space did well. That old bastard Hua Yaozu is the real demon. Just as Yi Boran had expected, everything was no longer a secret. Even though he had sealed off the news at the very first moment, everything was still leaked out, spreading out endlessly and uncontrollably. Yi Boran was powerless to stop this storm. He was even scolded badly, to the point that his face and ears turned red. He also knew a lot about the celebrations, venting, discussions, and all kinds of enthusiasm. To be exact, he was very clear about it. Didn't Lu Xuanhuan say that he was going to kill the Divine Arrow Marquis at midnight? How did it become the extraterrestrial demons that killed that old bastard? Why did he say that the gods were at the mercy of the heavenly souls, and that the heavenly souls were at the mercy of the gods? This was naturally a question that many people were puzzled about. After all, Chu Yang had already announced beforehand. I also think it's strange. If it's not Lu Xuanhuan but an extraterrestrial demon, then it's too much of a coincidence. That old bastard was really slaughtered in the middle of the night. It's a bit messy. First there's Lu Xuanhuan, then there's the extraterrestrial demon. I'm really confused. The extraterrestrial demons caused a big trouble a few days ago. Even the Scholar's Mountain is gone. It's not impossible to say that it's an extraterrestrial demon. If it's an extraterrestrial demon, shouldn't the old bastard Marquis Divine Arrow have died long ago? Why did he only die when Lu Xuanhuan said that he was going to take the old bastard's head in the middle of the night? Chapter 2275. What do you know? The Divine Arrow Marquis was killed by the demons from outer space. If you dare to say that Lu Xuanhuan killed him, I'll beat you to death. Amidst the crowd, people began to discuss the matter. Suddenly, someone appeared and began to beat people up, berating and warning them. At first, people didn't realize what was going on, but when they were guided, they all understood. Are you stupid? The Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, is a marquis of the imperial court. How can it be a small matter when a marquis is killed? You mean to say, what the hell are you talking about? You don't even understand this. Then do you know what it means to protect each other? At this point, the person who was scolded suddenly understood. Lu Xuanhuan killed the Divine Arrow Marquis, which was a big crime. The imperial court would definitely investigate. In this way, his life would be in danger. Naturally, he would need to find a scapegoat, and this scapegoat would be the demons from outer space. Wasn't this the most suitable scapegoat? Along with this realization, Yi Boran was shocked to find that there was a great change in the county city. There were no more discussions, and no one mentioned the name, Lu Xuanhuan. Almost everyone was shouting that the demons from outer space did justice for the heavens and killed the Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu. Such a tacit understanding was formed silently, causing Yi Boran to be completely shocked. He deeply realized that the hatred of the people toward the Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, had reached a level that was even greater than the anger of the heavens and the resentment of the people. Lu Xuanhuan. Yi Boran was ashamed and angry, but he also hated that Lu Xuanhuan didn't fight for it. His feelings were extremely complicated. Even if he wanted to protect Lu Xuanhuan, it was impossible. Suddenly, he thought of a possibility. He trembled as if he was struck by lightning, and cold sweat broke out all over his body. This could really be the work of the demons from outer space. Lu Xuanhuan had unearthed the power of Wendao, and the god realm wanted to kill him. But Lu Xuanhuan was too difficult to deal with, so they came up with a plan to kill Hua Yaozu, the god-killing Marquis of Arrow, and put the blame on Lu Xuanhuan. Then, with the help of the imperial court, they could kill Lu Xuanhuan. If that's the case, then it's really troublesome. Yi Boran was so anxious that his hair almost turned white overnight. However, despite thinking of this possibility, he still believed that it was Lu Xuanhuan who killed Hua Yaozu. On the same night, at the same time, in the same place, there was a place in Scholar Commandery that was also observing the development of the situation. Orders were constantly being sent out from there. This was the Scholar County's capital, the One Palace. At this moment, in the office of the Palace of Wen's chief inspector, the highest-ranking official of the Palace of Wen was enjoying the scalding hot tea under the flickering firelight. Opposite him was Secretary Xiao of the One Palace. Secretary Xiao also had great authority in the Palace of Wen and was in charge of many trivial matters. In the middle of the night, so many things happened in the Zhuangyuan County. Manager Li, who was in charge of the One Palace, was the second person under Yi Boran, but he did not show up to deal with the matter. Instead, he was drinking tea leisurely. If people knew about this, they would probably criticize him. The firelight was very bright, illuminating the surroundings as if it was daytime. The fragrant tea rose in spirals and could be seen incomparably clearly. That spiraling white mist was still very lovable. During this process, Manager Li and Secretary Zhao's trusted subordinates were constantly informing them about the situation in the county. However, the two of them were not concerned about the Divine Arrow Marquis mansion, but the discussions in the county. The two of them were especially concerned about the fact that the Divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, was killed by the demons from outer space. If there was another explanation, how would the people in the county react? Chapter 2276. The night was dark. In the past, it was very quiet at night like this, but tonight there were faint noises coming from afar. It seemed that it was this noise that made the flames flicker. Xiao Lusher took a sip of the warm tea. His face showed a pleasant expression as the warm tea entered his stomach. At this time, he said, "Brother Yuan He, the Marquis of Divine Arrow, Hua Yaozu, died tonight. What do you mean by this? I really don't understand." Yuan He was Manager Li's name, and his name was Li Hechuan. Xiao Shishir was Xiao Qingshang, and his name was Ling Yun. Hearing this, Li Hechuan didn't speak immediately. After taking a sip of tea, he slowly recited, "Sleeping in spring without knowing the dawn, I hear birds everywhere, wind and rain at night, I know how many flowers fall." Brother Ling Yun, have you heard of this poem? Spring Dawn. Hearing this, Xiao Qingshang immediately smiled bitterly. "Brother Yuan He, are you making fun of me? Such a poem has long been spread in our Zhuangyuan County. How can I not know?" "Brother Ling Yun, since you know about Spring Dawn, you should also know about Lu Xuanhuan, right?" Hearing this, Xiao Qingshang understood a little. Didn't tonight's matter have a lot to do with Lu Xuanhuan? And Li Hechuan's various responses all pointed to Lu Xuanhuan. But why did Li Hechuan want to kill Lu Xuanhuan? According to what he knew, Li Hechuan shouldn't know Lu Xuanhuan, and shouldn't have any enmity with him. Brother Yuan He, can you explain it more clearly? Brother Ling Yun, you've heard that the divine fragrance talented lady is in the East Continent. Li Hechuan paused for a moment and said again, "To be exact, in the East Baron, the divine fragrance talented lady has a fiancé named Chu Yang." Chu Yang. Xiao Qingshang seemed to be unfamiliar with this name, but also familiar. Then he realized that he had heard this name before. Such a name was already known by many in the Middle Continent, because the owner of this name was the divine fragrance girl's fiancé. After being slightly surprised, he roughly understood. "Brother Yuan He, are you saying that this Lu Xuanhuan is that Chu Yang?" "Brother Ling Yun, do you think it's impossible?" Xiao Qingshang could not help but be stunned. He and Li Hechuan should have never seen Chu Yang, or Lu Xuanhuan, So why would Li Hechuan suspect that Lu Xuanhuan was the fiancé of the divine fragrance lady, Chu Yang? What was the basis for such a judgment? Chun Xiao. Xiao Qingshang finally found an idea. Brother Yuanhe, just based on this song, how can you be sure that Lu Xuanhuan is Chu Yang? The Spring Dawn was indeed extraordinary. It was a first-class poem, and had been included in the Book of Songs. Such a thing had not happened in the Central State for many years. Li Hechuan smiled. Is Lu Xuanhuan from the East Continent? What does that prove? Not only did Lu Xuanhuan create the Spring Dawn, he also triggered the Book of Songs in an instant. It can be said to be a fantasy story, unimaginable, right? This can only mean that Lu Xuanhuan is extremely shocking, but Xiao Qingshang was interrupted by Li Hechuan. There are definitely not many people who are this shocking, right? He could only nod and admit that such a shocking thing was not rare, but could be said to be unique. There are definitely not many people who can be this shocking, right? This was naturally the case. Who in the East Continent can create such a shocking thing? Xiao Qingshang was stunned again, and then couldn't help but blurt out Chu Yang. Chapter 2277. To be honest, Xiao Qingshang was still a little puzzled. However, after reading through the contents of the booklet, he no longer had any doubt. He completely agreed with Li Hechuan's judgment. Lu Xuanhuan was very likely Chu Yang. The booklet recorded in detail all the things that Chu Yang had done in the East Continent. There were many shocking and unbelievable things. Chu Yang's rise in the East Continent was extremely fast. In a little more than a year, he had suppressed the entire East Continent and made the East Continent submit to his rule. Just this point alone was enough to show that this person called Chu Yang was no ordinary person. He was a monster among monsters. Lu Xuanhuan also had such a characteristic. Thus, it was highly possible to suspect that Lu Xuanhuan and Chu Yang were the same person. After all, there were too few people in this world who were as talented as him. In addition, the booklet recorded in detail that Chu Yang was extremely good at changing his appearance and concealing himself. It was even more likely that he had turned into Lu Xuanhuan. As for why Li Hechuan wanted to secretly kill Chu Yang, Xiao Qingshang could not be clearer. As long as he got Chu Yang's head, he would gain too much to imagine. First Prince, Third Prince, Seventh Prince, the genius of the Kong clan, the genius of the Qin clan, and so on. Xiao Qingshang thought of too many shocking names in an instant. There were too many young talents and heroes in the Central Continent who wanted Chu Yang dead. Seeing that Xiao Qingshang had completely understood, Li Hechuan smiled again and said, "Brother Lingyun, do you have any questions about my actions? Are you willing to participate?" Ha ha! Xiao Qingshang laughed and cupped his fists at Li Hechuan. "Thank you for your support, Brother Yuanhe." Naturally, he had to laugh and laugh. This was a profitable business. Once the judgment was correct, the gains would be beyond imagination. Even if the judgment was wrong, there was no loss. Who knew what they were doing behind the scenes? Yi Boran knew, but did Lu Xuanhuan know? Lu Xuanhuan wouldn't even know how he died. I have already informed the person from the Sage Monarch Academy about this matter. I heard that only he was satisfied with the two of us. Even if there was a mistake, it doesn't matter. Xiao Qingshang immediately started to flatter Li Hechuan. Good. Brother Li Hechuan is really brilliant. Even if Lu Xuanhuan isn't Chu Yang, the person from the Saint King College knows that Brother Li Hechuan has put in so much effort. How could he treat Brother Li Hechuan badly? And if he is like this, then who will be loyal to him in the future? Even if there is, I'm afraid he would hesitate for a while. Brother Lingyun, you flatter me. Li Hechuan didn't feel complacent. Who didn't know how to use such a method? However, he was still very happy because there weren't many people who could be as sharp as him. When the two of them confirmed that almost everyone in the county city believed that the divine Arrow Marquis, Hua Yaozu, was killed by Lu Sunhuan and was doing their best to cover up for Lu Sunhuan, they were even more delighted. How could a bunch of fools hide anything? Although they had good intentions and didn't want Lu Sunhuan to die, they were pushing Lu Sunhuan towards the guillotine step by step. The two of them laughed happily, spreading far and wide in the dark night. However, not many people could hear it. Even if they heard it, they wouldn't be able to think that there was a hidden conspiracy behind the laughter. Their laughter seemed to mock the night away. The darkness retreated without anyone noticing. Traces of light appeared, and clouds appeared in the sky. A new morning had arrived. Chapter 2278. Greetings, Benefactor Lu. Many people from the county city were waiting outside. Some of them had brought their families with them, and some were even sobbing. As soon as Chu Yang appeared, these people immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to him. Seeing them kneel, many people also knelt down. Immediately, everyone on the street knelt down. Even the people outside also knelt down after seeing this. As this spread out, the entire county city was in the same state. This scene was so shocking that Yi Boran, Ma Kongquan, and the others who were rushing to the savant's restaurant were shocked. Chu Yang had sharp senses and saw this clearly. He thought to himself, "It seems that I was right to be willful this time." Then, he smelled the strong smell of firecrackers in the air. He cupped his fists and smiled at everyone. "Everyone, please forgive me. It's the new year, and so many people wish me a happy new year. I have nothing and don't have so much lucky money." Ha ha! Everyone burst into laughter. Again, Chu Yang cupped his fists again and said to the crowd, "Everyone, the death of that old bastard Marquis Divine Arrow has nothing to do with me." As he spoke, he pointed at the top scholar's tower and said, "Last night at the top scholar's tower, there are many people who can testify that I was indeed upstairs drinking until dawn. Therefore, I hope that everyone can pass on the message and not accuse a good person like me." Chu Yang's performance was just as they had imagined. Immediately, they burst into laughter again. Then, some people kept shouting loudly, "Benefactor Lu, I can testify for you that the one who killed your old bastard last night was an extraterrestrial demon. It has nothing to do with you." "That's right. I can also testify that everything was done by the extraterrestrial demon. If the Imperial Court makes things difficult for you, I'll be the first to disagree." At first, it was fine, but later on, Chu Yang felt that something was wrong. He realized that everyone thought that he was the one who killed the Marquis Divine Arrow, and everyone was covering up for him. It was completely different from what he thought. "Doesn't this prove that I'm the one who killed the Divine Arrow Marquis?" He thought deeper and his heart sank again. "Is it because the people of the county city are grateful to me and spontaneously do this? Or is someone plotting against me behind my back and deliberately creating and promoting such public opinion? The possibility of it happening spontaneously is not high. No matter how bad the Divine Arrow Marquis manner is, it is impossible for everyone to be grateful to me and like me. There is only one possibility. There were many numb people in the world, and many people who did not know how to be grateful. It was impossible for everyone in Scholar County to be grateful to him. Then who is it that wants to scheme against me?" This was something he could not understand. He did not have many enemies in Champion County, definitely not many. That thing called Vermilion Jade? The remaining forces of the Divine Arrow Marquis Manor are taking revenge. Chu Yang immediately thought of two possibilities, but his intuition told him that it shouldn't be either of them, but someone else. Could it be that I've already exposed some sort of flaw and been discovered by others, but I still don't know about it? He frowned. He was not very worried, but he was very displeased. If it really did not work, he could give up his identity as Lu Xuanhuan and change his appearance. Who would be able to track him down? The only problem was that he would need to return to Little Eastern Town and get a new identity. I'll take a look first. If it doesn't work, then this is the only way. After thinking for a while, Chu Yang was about to leave. However, he heard a loud sound of something tearing through the air. He looked up and saw Yi Boran and Ma Kongquan. At this moment, Yi Boran flew over with anger. His eyes were about to spit fire. Chapter 2279. Lu Xuanhuan, did you kill the divine Arrow Marquis? Yi Boran flew over at lightning speed. He hadn't arrived yet, but his angry voice was like thunder. It rolled over and formed a visible sound wave that rushed towards Chu Yang. A strong wind rose out of nowhere, and swept over with a loud hoo-hoo sound. Chu Yang felt his long hair fluttering in the strong wind. His pupils constricted slightly as he thought to himself, what kind of attitude will Yi Boran have? He seems to be extremely dissatisfied with me. Dong. Yi Boran landed in front of Chu Yang from midair. The earth shook and the gale became even fiercer. The surging energy surged out, and nearly blew the surrounding people away. When he glared at Chu Yang coldly, the pressure of a county governor and a saint spread out. The lively scene immediately fell into dead silence. But, in such silence, Chu Yang calmly opened the folding fan in his hand. The words on the two sides of the fan appeared in front of everyone. I am a genius, and I am loved by all. When Yi Boran sensed the two lines, the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. Ha ha! Many people in the crowd burst into laughter. They did not know what to say about Chu Yang anymore. Why did he have to write such narcissistic words? Couldn't he write something else? Ma Kongquan could only shake his head and smile bitterly at this scene. The tense atmosphere at the scene immediately collapsed. The reverence people had for Yi Boran also disappeared quickly. Many people were already angry and glared at Yi Boran and the others from the county governor's mansion. Did you kill the divine Arrow Marquis? The words on Chu Yang's folding fan were just an interlude. Yi Boran asked again in a cold voice, full of sternness. County governor. Chu Yang gently fanned himself with his folding fan. He glanced at Yi Boran and carefully sensed his aura. Then, he said, I don't know why Your Excellency is asking such a question. Could Your Excellency please dispel my doubts? As he spoke, he bowed to Yi Boran. Still playing dumb? Yi Boran's heart was filled with hatred. He said angrily, Yesterday, were you the one who said that you would take the divine Arrow Marquis head at midnight? Yes. Chu Yang admitted it directly and argued, but it was just a joke. How can you be so sure that the person who killed the divine Arrow Marquis is me? Isn't that too arbitrary? He refused to admit it. Yi Boran was enraged again, but he didn't have any evidence. In fact, he hadn't made up his mind on how to deal with this matter. Now that he was provoked by Chu Yang, in addition to the mixed feelings in his heart, he directly said coldly, Lu Xuanhuan, you still dare to quibble. The voice was like thunder and the pressure was endless. However, there were too many angry people in the crowd, and there was no lack of bold people among them. When they saw Chu Yang being pressured in such a manner, they immediately cried out in anger. Dog official! It was only 2 words, but they seemed to have ignited a barrel of dynamite. The crowd immediately exploded. All the dissatisfaction with Yi Boran and the prefectural governor's office was vented out like a torrent. Damn dog official, are you only showing off now? When that old bastard of the divine Arrow Marquis residence was lawless, why didn't you show off your power? Yi Boran, you dog, are you blind? Why didn't the heavens strike you to death? What a powerful official, but you were even more impressive in front of that old bastard, the divine Arrow Marquis, when you were barking like a dog and wagging your tail. Bah! Yen %, #### yen. At the very beginning, the curses were still fine, but as time went on, the curses became more and more unpleasant and grating. Yi Boran's 18 generations of ancestors, old and young, were all viciously cursed. It could be said that they were cursing as viciously as possible. Chapter 2280. Yi Boran was stunned on the spot. As he listened to the countless curses, he felt as if he was being pointed at by thousands and spurned by tens of thousands. His heart throbbed with pain. Am I, Yi Boran, really so unbearable? The people under my rule actually resent me to such an extent. Is it actually so intense? Only at this moment did he realize how big of a tumor the divine Aromarquis was. He could no longer be tolerated, but he had compromised again and again. Goa, take off your bullshit clothes immediately. Otherwise, if you dare to step into my house again, I'll break your legs. An old man shouted at a sturdy official. His spittle flew everywhere and he was extremely agitated. Wang Feihu, if you dare to touch a hair of Benefactor Liu, you can forget about that marriage. You coward, your conscience has been eaten by dogs. Sister-in-law was harmed by the people of the divine Aromarquis residence. You don't dare to take revenge, but now you want to take revenge for those bastards? When there was a first, there would be a second. The officials of the prefectural governor's residence were immediately baptized by a storm. They were all red in the face and could not raise their heads. Am I wrong? Yi Boran once again felt the resentment of his subordinates, and he couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness in his heart. He was the governor of a county, and as the parent official of a region, was he really that bad? But Chu Yang closed his folding fan and stopped the agitated people. The crowd immediately fell silent. Seeing such a shocking contrast, Yi Boran's hands could not help but tremble slightly. All these years, he thought he had been cautious and conscientious in governing the Zhuangyuan county. He did not slack off at all, but in the end this was the result. At this moment, he seemed to finally understand something. He had done a lot, but he had not done the most important thing, the divine Aromarquis residence. This was the crux of the problem. Such a realization and self-denial made him close his eyes in pain. Chu Yang could only shake his head. People could only bully officials like Yi Boran. If it were other officials, no one would dare to be impudent once they showed their power. Prefectural governor, I'm not quibbling. Chu Yang broke the silence and pointed at the savant's restaurant before saying, Last night, I drank all night in the savant's restaurant. There are many people in the savant's restaurant who can testify for me. I hope that your excellency can judge clearly. Yi Boran was furious with Chu Yang. The gods are at the mercy of the heavenly souls. If the heavenly souls are not righteous, the gods will come. Do you know that? How could Chu Yang not know this? He originally wanted to use this to confuse the public, but he didn't expect that someone would use this to plot against him. Of course I know. So, you're saying that you're colluding with the extraterrestrial demons, right? Yi Boran gritted his teeth and said this in an extremely stern tone. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat when he was questioned like this. However, he soon calmed down and asked, Prefectural governor, is the crime of God of killing Aromarquis more serious, or the crime of colluding with the extraterrestrial devils? The answer was self-evident. Yi Boran also understood what Chu Yang meant. Prefectural governor, Chu Yang continued, why would I be so stupid as to use a huge crime to cover up a small crime? If he wasn't a fool, who would do this? Yi Boran was completely speechless. He really couldn't find any evidence against Chu Yang. Later on, Chu Yang could even say that he was only in the Nirvana realm. How could he kill the saint-level Marquis god of killing Aromarquis? This point was very difficult to explain. He could think of Chu Yang's shocking abilities, but could others also think of it? Could they agree? It wasn't convincing. It was time for him to give this matter some thought. Prefectural governor. Chapter 2281. Xiao Xing did not stop. His refined manner was completely different from Chu Yang's. He finally felt that these two words really did not suit him. Yi Boran did not say anything. Chu Yang directly left. With a boom, the crowd immediately left with Chu Yang. They seemed to be Chu Yang's guards, but they were actually following to watch the show. Not waiting for the imperial court's imperial examination, directly going to take the special examination was a bit interesting in itself. Moreover, this person was Chu Yang. Looking at the stream of people leaving, Yi Boran suddenly said, "Did that bastard show mercy to me?" He said this to Ma Kongquan. Ma Kongquan was completely confused. "If you don't have a diamond, don't take on a porcelain job." Yi Boran laughed angrily and said, "I can foresee that if I continue, he will definitely mock me. If I don't have the ability to be the prefectural governor, then let someone with ability take it. Look, I've lost all my face to the otherworldly demons." Ma Kongquan was speechless, but he agreed with Yi Boran's opinion. Based on his understanding of Yi Boran, Lu Xuanhuan's words could only be more vicious. For example, something like squatting in the latrine and not taking a shit would definitely come out. After Yi Boran's side ended, the other side began. Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang guessed that Chu Yang definitely wanted to leave as soon as possible. Zhuangyuan County was a dangerous place, so he would definitely come to participate in the assessment as soon as possible. Their guess was not wrong. The people who were watching them sent back news that Chu Yang was quickly coming to the One Palace, and there were many people following behind him. They could not help but laugh, as expected. The two of them came personally because this was a great opportunity to get close to Chu Yang and determine whether Lu Xuanhuan and Chu Yang were the same person. How could they let go of this great opportunity? When Chu Yang arrived, he immediately saw the two of them. While he was sizing up Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang, the two of them were also observing Chu Yang very carefully. Sometimes they frowned, sometimes they stroked their beards, sometimes they shook their heads, as if intensely thinking about something. "I don't know these two, right?" Chu Yang felt a little strange. He shouldn't have received so much attention from the two of them, but in the blink of an eye, he understood that it should be related to the matter of the Divine Arrow Marquis residence. The people from the county city had followed him here. Furthermore, the Divine Arrow Marquis manor was such a huge matter, so how could the two of them not know who he was? These two people are both sages. After that, Chu Yang noticed Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang's cultivation. "You're that Lu Xuanhuan who killed the Marquis of Divine Arrow?" Chu Yang didn't open his mouth. One of the two was holding a folding fan in his hand, and was gently waving it. The elegant middle-aged man was the first to open his mouth. This person was neither fat nor thin, neither tall nor short, neither handsome nor ugly. Everything about him was very ordinary. If he was thrown into a crowd, he would definitely not stand out, even if he was very elegant. He didn't seem polite when he spoke, but he also seemed polite. For some reason, Chu Yang felt that it was strange. The other person was half a head shorter. He had a square face and a flat nose. At first glance, his face seemed to be of the same level. There was a faint hostility, disdain, and even a trace of pride in his expression. "What are you so proud of?" These two people gave Chu Yang a strange feeling. He looked at the person holding the fan and said, "That's right. This little one is Lu Xuanhuan. You're suspected of killing the Marquis of Divine Arrow. I'm officially notifying you now." Pa! When that person folded his fan, he seemed as elegant as Chu Yang. Then, he said with an unreadable expression, "Therefore, you don't have the right to participate in the special test of the One Palace for now." "Don't have the right to participate in the test? Are you trying to mess with me?" Chapter 2282. Therefore, You don't have the right to participate in the School of Wen's special test for the time being. Chu Yang kept repeating this sentence in his mind. It could be said that there was nothing wrong with it. However, the two people in front of him seemed to have him in their grasp. In fact, there was even a faint feeling of a feather fan and a silk handkerchief. It was as if they were talking and laughing, and it was as if they could vanish into thin air. This made him very unhappy. However, in reality, Chu Yang had already been destroyed to a certain extent. The two people in front of him decided with just a word. It could be said that they were very confident. May I know the names of the two lords? When Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang heard this, they looked at each other and smiled. This barbarian from the eastern wilderness was indeed controlled by them. No matter how unhappy they were, they couldn't do anything. Do you deserve to know? That ordinary-looking man was Li Hechuan. He was neither fat nor thin, neither tall nor short. He was waving the folding fan in his hand. Then, he suddenly spoke these words with extreme contempt. This made Chu Yang's heart burn with anger. He sensed my disgust, so he became even more impolite. Chu Yang immediately confirmed this point. Barbarian, is this just the truth? The person with a very flat face was naturally Xiao Qingshang. He also humiliated and ridiculed Chu Yang. Although the people were angry and felt injustice for Chu Yang, there was nothing wrong with what Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang said. Chu Yang was just a refugee from the eastern continent. Compared to Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang, who were saints, he really didn't have any status or identity. Moreover, the two of them were officials of the School of One. Chu Yang was a commoner, while the two of them were officials. There was a huge difference in status, so it was natural for them to look down on Chu Yang. This kind of thing happened every day. Chu Yang put away the folding fan and put it behind his neck. He clenched his fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. He really wanted to slaughter these two people in front of him on the spot. His sudden action had truly shocked everyone. Slaughtering two officials of the One Palace Hall in broad daylight under the watchful eyes of so many people, this was completely different from killing the divine Arrow Marquis. Li Hechuan and Xiao Qingshang's eyelids twitched when they saw that Chu Yang was about to attack. Perhaps this barbarian really did have the ability to kill the two of them because the divine Arrow Marquis really might have died to this barbarian. They became vigilant. So, the two of you are planning to mess with me? Chu Yang's face was full of smiles. How dare you? A mere barbarian dared to behave in such a manner? Li Hechuan roared out in anger. Soon after, he rebuked and warned Chu Yang. Lu Sunhuan, you dare to be so presumptuous in front of me. Do you know what crime you have committed? What was done was done. What was done could not be undone. But if it was only to this extent, it did not hurt or itch. The person from the Sage Monarch Academy would probably not give him any extra point. Li Hechuan immediately spoke again. He directly used the might of a saint and ordered, "Kneel." Boom. A great wave of might burst forth like a landslide. The saint's words were followed by the profound meaning, and all of it was used on Chu Yang. Chu Yang's long hair was like a whip, lashing out in the void. His sleeves were also like whips, and the folding fan at the back of his neck was directly blown away. When the folding fan flew so far away that his hand was almost unable to reach it, Chu Yang didn't even turn his head. He grabbed the folding fan in his hand and opened it with a snap. It was as if he had slapped the saint's coercion. Under the endless pressure of the saint's might, he gently waved the folding fan. He was not affected at all. Everyone was silent. Chu Yang was facing the saint's might, and he was not affected at all. In an instant, the people were even more certain that the person who killed the divine Arrow Marquis was Chu Yang. Continue. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.